You've got this. I've seen your work. You're clever, adaptable, and you don't know when to quit.
I suspect you have questions.
Do you think Dragon Age has a very has integrated different backgrounds well? That one is very much on that side, almost like borderline, like it's a little almost fetishy type. So, but it's really cute. It really is.
Captured Com's attention again.
Yeah.
I love that word.
Yeah.
So, what do you want me to do?
Ooh. What do I want you to do?
I'm passionate.
Passion.
My neck.
We're about to do a Calvin Klein commercial here.
I am actually in underwear, so we could.
Stand up. Quick.
You know, as a kid, I never got into the friendly arming in Baldur's Gate because of that fucking wizard.
Oh, really?
Never got in there.
Yeah.
It's fine. I didn't realize about, drag the guards in or drag them over to the guards. I just didn't think about that. So, because I normally played games that you could just win.
Oh, you could still do a lot in Act 1.
Before you go to friendly arm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a really good game, isn't it? I know it's not exactly a hot take, but it's really fucking good.
How could I say no to the giant kaiju fights?
What's kaiju?
Big giant. Think Godzilla, like giant oversized monster.
Oh, so Final Fantasy 16 then? That's the shit.
Yeah,
that's the shit.
Mm-hmm.
See, Sniffs, this is what I deal with like constantly. This is what I always edit out so Com doesn't tell me, what's this? What's that?
What the hell's a mouse?
I'm just gauging so that I know where everybody is.
No,
So
you're good, man.
Okay.
He's testing you.
He's testing me.
I'm just
My
trying to get a feel
cognitive
of how childish you are.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, pee pee poo poo. That's easy.
Yeah.
trying to see if I can tell you to act your age or not.
Before we begin, the Gamers Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Welcome on in to another Gamers Advocate. We appreciate everybody being here. We have a guest today. I'm very excited about today's episode. Man, we're going to revisit some Veilguard stuff. And
what are you giggling about?
Every episode starts this way, just out of nowhere. Hey, Banana. Welcome to the Gamers Advocate podcast.
Yeah, we started something with the Veilguard thing, and it actually got quite a lot of views compared to our other videos. But our other videos will eventually catch up because they are classics and they are one of a kind.
Sure.
Genre
I was going to
defining.
say the Game of the Year convo is always a good hot topic.
Yeah. And so if you like any of the videos, give them a like. Comments are always appreciated. I'm going to start off with that because I always wait till the very end of this, but I should be saying this more toward the beginning. But today we have a very special guest. We have Sniffs. Goes by Sniffmapeter in Twitch. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do. It's just where my VODs go. It's not like I do anything crazy. I literally just hit export and they're all it just goes right over. I don't touch it or nothing.
It is interesting between Com, Banana, and myself that we have these circles that are they're overlapping in many other people that we know. And yours was one that was outside of, I don't know why. I mean, I think from time to time I've seen you comment in Momus's stuff.
Yeah, I usually would be in Momus's. The rare occasion when Com would stream, and then every once in a while I'm over in Vidiots if I'm not busy at work.
And I think it's because I'm not often in Momus's side, and Com doesn't stream that much, and there's that whole thing there maybe. But it is interesting that there's these whole worlds of groups that we all know, but indirectly. But if we really pulled our collaboration efforts together, there's a whole world of people we would probably know.
I was going to say, Twitch is a much smaller place than you think.
It feels as though there's sort of almost one degree of separation between most of us. We have, I think the words we've used to describe it before is they're a very incestuous set of communities. And you and Sniff right now are sort of in that first cousin part. You see, definitely bonded, but not quite directly.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily pinpoint it because it was specifically Com rated me for doing. I was playing Dark Souls 3 for the first time. Com rated me because I guess he was playing Dark Souls 3, and then and Momus was a part of it, and I remember specifically seeing his name and being like, that's a really dope name. And then I woke up the next morning and on my recommended feed, Momus was live, and it was like, a Momus of Your Time is live. And I was like, oh, I remember his name. And I went in there and damn it, I never left.
Bullied the hell out of him.
And we continue to bully him to this day.
We were so young.
I had the pleasure. We just very briefly before we start recording, got to ask you a few biographical questions just to, like where you're from, stuff like that. But tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I play a lot of time. I've been playing a lot of Souls games. That's kind of just been how I came into the streamer space, and then kind of been on a bit of a hiatus from that up until the last couple of days. But I've been playing just like a little bit of everything. So I play. My biggest thing is I always go back to Stardew because it's just very easy to get in that kind of loop. And then
they're very similar. Dark Souls and Stardew.
Yeah, Dark Souls, Stardew. That combat is immaculate, let me tell you. That's roughly it.
Farm simulator.
I was gonna say I'll play just about anything other than like sports or racing games. Those don't really jive with me too well. But
is there a game genre that you played with mostly when you were growing up, or?
Growing up was a lot of them were just very Nintendo focused games. Growing up, I never had like access to PlayStation stuff until I was late in my teenage years.
It's always great to get a perspective from a streamer because although Banana and myself stream in air quotes, it's not consistent at all. You probably doing it once a week is far more consistent than what we do. I've been cutting it down. Like I used to do like 3 to 4 days, and then now it's just 2 days. It's 2 days a week. I do a collab with a friend of mine. We play Nancy Drew games, and then and then Thursdays or whatever I feel like playing. So it looks like right now my Thursdays are 9 Souls. Because we are called the Gamers Advocates. So I like to get point of views from all over the place. And, someone like myself who has the time, doesn't always have the time, I should say, to sit down and digest a game. I have to really go slow with it and take my time, and I work full time and I edit. So there's a lot of things that there's a lot of things that I really have to pay close attention to, but not everybody plays games like that. And then so like someone like yourself who's a streamer who has the distractions of chat, the distractions of real life, you don't always get to see the game from a perspective of oh, I didn't even notice that was a thing in that game, maybe because you just didn't have the opportunity. So it's always great to see a different perspective.
Yeah, it helps a lot if I'm going to stream, it just helps more to play a game that I'm pretty familiar with, or it's a game that shares mechanics with other games that I've played. So it's easy for me to do a first playthrough of 9 Souls, but I've played Hollow Knight and I've played Sekiro, and I'm used to those, the running around, exploring, or also just the more difficult combat. So I'm able to stay with chat, but also my chat in particular is typically very lurker friendly focused. I get people chiming in every once in a while, mostly just to give me some grief. But other than that, it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, it's Twitch. Yeah. And what I appreciate about Banana is very much of a 100%er. He's a completionist. He likes to see everything that you can in that. And that's a really interesting way to go because if there were no achievements, then you wouldn't even know maybe about half. Because when I grew up with the NES, we didn't have no achievements. We just played the game. It was okay, maybe Nintendo Power gave us some information. We don't know. And then comes always from a perspective of a very blank slate. we're going to approach this. I'm going to have no opinions. And I really appreciate that. You don't see that very often. A lot of times people go in with an opinion because just the art or the cover of the game or something just didn't fascinate them. So, is there anything?
Yeah, I was very non-partisan for Final Fantasy Remake. Very non-partisan. Oh.
He actually was like, "Whoa, that looks really cool. I don't know what that is."
But is there anything like when a game comes out that like would, get your attention right off the bat? They don't have to be specific, but is there anything like modern games that would get your attention?
No, I don't think so. And I guess like if we were just to talk like back in the day when I was like baby gamer, it was very much like big flashy blockbustery kind of things were gonna grab my eye, just like that marketing is meant to do. Like I could easily get won by marketing. I'm pretty prime on that. Like I always have the like benefit of the doubt for everything, people, games, any other kind of media. Like I just always have that benefit of the doubt. But if it's something that I have some kind of like background with prior, sometimes I'll be like, maybe, I don't know. Once I'm able to start doing comparison stuff, that's where it starts getting into muddy waters. But recently my big question always is now, especially with like due to inflation and just that recent within the last couple of years of that raise from $60 to $70, like it may be $10, but that's a big ask. And I always have to stop and ask that question of like, is this really worth the $70 that I'm about to pay?
I have a blues background, and when you said muddy waters, I know he's from that part of where you come from, so I appreciated that reference there. So, yeah. Well, and that's what got my attention, because when Banana said that you were interested in talking about Veilguard, I kind of, like I said, I don't know you from other channels. I know Banana knows you, and I know Com knew you. I was like, I'm surprised I don't know you as much, but I always had the impression that you were more of a Souls player. So I was like, really? He wants to talk about Veilguard? Really?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm talk to anybody about it.
I think the biggest thing, we could always dig more in it, but the thing that always caught me with Veilguard in particular, and I was talking to Banana about this, I think it was last weekend, because I've been dying to talk to people about this game in particular, mostly because it's been such a a negatively hot button topic, between like, is this an RPG? Has this gone so woke? Like, that all that kind of just, it's really stupid. And it's always just rage baiting is really what I feel like when it comes to Veilguard. And I compared the people's reaction with this to the way people reacted to Andromeda. Now, whether or not you think Andromeda is a good game or not, that's really not the point. I don't think it deserved the utter hate that it received, to the point that like BioWare and EA just went, all right, we're not doing anything else with this. There was such raw potential within Andromeda and what they were trying to craft that people hated on it so hard that they were just like, okay, well, I guess we won't explore this potential at all, because people people just decided to dogpile it. Everybody gave it the Nickelback treatment.
I think this is where our conversation is going to end, because I'm a notorious Andromeda rage.
You can't give Andromeda any credit and stay on. I'm sorry.
No, it comes from a place of love, but I did it. I've played the game a couple of times through, at least. It was hard because it launched kind of like Cyberpunk, where it was so buggy you couldn't play it. And then when they fixed it, because I played it through even the fixing, just like I did Cyberpunk, even when they fixed it. And I'm not trying to defend or go against, this is just facts, about Andromeda during that time period. When it came out, I couldn't tell that they fixed anything, because a lot of the assets that they used they looked wrong because like all the Turians looked the exact same. And I thought, is it my monitor? Is it my what's going on here? And no, that was the completed game. That's how they wanted it to look. It's like, what? Why? Yeah, that Frostbite engine is just, I'm so glad the Veilguard is going to be the last we hear about, I hope, of the Frostbite engine. It's just,
everybody's just like, Unreal 5, we're done. We're everybody should, I mean, hell, the next CDPR project, the new Witcher game, whatever it may be, they're moving away from their Frost engine?
The Red engine. Yeah.
Red engine.
Yeah.
And they're moving to Unreal.
I think you're seeing a recognition amongst almost everyone, large studios, small studios, that designing your own engine doesn't necessarily reap you any benefits. Unless your engine needs to do something that an engine can't already do, you probably don't need to go and make your own, short of you want to make your own.
I was going to say the whole engine talk was just a way to have some form of a copyright or to really maintain that IP essentially. And like people, that was like that like competition push. Like that was what was really the competition push, was like, oh, well, with our engine, we're able to pull off these particular things. And how I perceived it was like, part of me felt like companies were developing their engines in hopes that other companies would then say, we like what that engine can do. Let's see if we can maybe we'll pay Bethesda X amount of money for whatever that engine was called for Skyrim.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll bookmark this because I definitely think that we could have a conversation about Andromeda alone, which of course the comments will say how we don't understand why Banana loves Andromeda so much, but we'll bookmark this one because I think it's somewhat relevant because we are talking about the same developer, it's BioWare. So there's some merit there because you're pulling history of what they did that was successful. Did they learn from their mistakes? I think that's really, really where I wanted to go with that type of conversation with Andromeda versus Veilguard, because that's the next big game that really kind of came out after that. And I'm not going to really include Anthem because that was more of a looter shooter type thing that had a potential. It did have potential.
It had a lot of potential. I almost bought that game. I don't know.
I really liked that game for about a week.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of felt stale.
Yeah. That's what looter shooters do.
If I had game engine topic sometime as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to play a game, and I think Sniffs will probably. And do you want me to go by Sniffs or Sniffmapeter?
Yeah, Sniffs is fine.
Or just Peter?
It's really whatever you do. I say that every time I get raided. You can call me Sniff, you can call me Peter, you can call me a shithead, and I'd probably respond.
Just don't call me late for dinner.
Just don't call me late for dinner.
Yeah. We play a game, and we haven't named it yet. I guess we'll call it what's that game? I don't remember what we were thinking of.
Oh, is this the like poor descriptor?
Thinking about that.
Yeah.
Give it a poor descriptor and then try to guess the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it was basically, and Banana came up with it. He had a really excellent one last time, so I thought I'd give it a shot. And I know Com and Banana played this game. That's why I was asking also about your history of games, but it sounds like you played several.
I was really worried you were going to ask Sniff if he had played specifically the game you were about to give a bad description of.
See, and that's how bad my memory is because Banana knows me so well that it, like sometimes, I can't help it. So we're going to play this game and it's good. So I gave a basic description, or a really poor description, I should say. So I wrote it. So who knows? Maybe it's bad. I don't know. And then you guys could try. I think you guys will have it like that. That's my opinion. But an apprentice dropout runs from the law for being part of a terrorist organization. He is horrible at playing hide and seek, but finds his path through parkour, like auditioning for a space-themed escape room. Our hero occasionally gets stuck in rooms for an embarrassing amount of time, only to discover puzzles that make him question his life choices. Zip lines are no problem as long as he is holding onto a Swiss Army knife companion.
Oh, I've forgotten the name.
I was about to say, is this Veilguard?
Is it? I can't remember the name, but is it the Star Wars that's quite modern, looks a bit like Dark Souls, and it's not called Jedi Academy.
Oh, the
Fallen Order?
yeah, that's the one.
There you go. Fallen Order. Yeah.
I haven't
I
played
I have
that
no
one.
idea why
Line.
that didn't click. Should have immediately gone to Star Wars games.
I
But
thought
was
for sure. Yeah, I thought for sure when I said like it finds his path through parkour like he's auditioning for a space themed escape room.
Yeah.
I thought maybe there.
Yeah, I think this is one of those games where like everything clicks at the end.
Yeah.
But like when you're trying to come up with your game, you're like, I have no fucking idea.
At first, my thought
Stupidly.
went my first thought went into something like Assassin's Creed 2, and then you said space, and I went, oh, that's out.
See, I went a slightly different way. I had Uncharted in my head, and then he said space-themed escape room, and I thought, I can make that work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Try and wedge this wrong answer in here.
Yeah. And I like our hero occasionally gets stuck in rooms for an embarrassing amount of time only to discover puzzles that made him question his life choices.
I mean, when you got to that point, I was like, oh, this is every game I've ever played.
So let's talk Veilguard. Full spoilers here. So y'all that are listening
Spoiler
or
heavy
watching,
episode.
yeah,
Aged milk.
will not hold back on spoilers. And so if you guys want to say whatever you need to say, we've actually been holding off on making this video because we wanted to give ample time for as many people as possible who have wanted to play the game to have tried to. Maybe you haven't finished it. That's okay, but we're here for
Been
you.
holding off on this episode specifically because of Com.
I've
Yeah.
been busy.
Everybody, yeah, we all have been busy. It's good. But at least you didn't like rush through it and be like, I don't remember that part. So at least you're good there.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. Definitely.
Yeah.
We started off with first impressions in our previous video. Where are we at now? If you could give yourself a rough like out of 10, we're not gonna do like S tier, but whatever. Out of 10, where would you guys? Let's start with Banana. Where would you place Veilguard?
I think I'd probably give the game overall like a 7 out of 10. I think that even might be pulled up just because it's a Dragon Age game, and I think they did a great job staying consistent with the Dragon Age lore. Gameplay is fun. It doesn't get, boring or crazy repetitive. It's always still pretty engaging. The story is, I've said before, I don't think it's tremendously imaginative and making a huge breakthrough anywhere. I think a lot of the writing we've discussed is kind of aimed almost at that like young adult audience, and for people who have followed the entire series, it's always been aimed at that audience, so we've kind of grown out of it. But I think for that audience, the writing is solid. Maybe a bit cliched or familiar, but
Yeah, a little
not bad.
ham-fisted.
But yeah, definitely a little heavy-handed at times. I think some of the messaging is weak. The message itself is solid, but the way they go about delivering it is a bit weak, a bit too heavy-handed, a bit on the nose at times, and I feel like that really, when you can't deliver a message in a way that gets people to open their mind, you're kind of defeating the purpose. But overall, I'd say it was a good game. Nothing exceptional. But I enjoyed it. So I'd say 7 out of 10 is a fair assessment.
So on a scale where 5 isn't a bad game by any means, for myself, I try to say that 5 is genuinely an average game, 6 is good. When you get above that, you're talking very, very good. For myself, I've got it somewhere around a 6. It's good. It's not great. It's rarely bad. Oddly enough, it hits some really, really high notes once in a while. The way that it came into my head to compare it was, it's like a surprisingly good cover band singer, where most of the time, oh, that's fine, and then every now and again they'll break out a cover of Whitney Houston and fucking nail it. It's that for me. They spend a lot of time hanging around that 5, and they get these moments where they have 8s, where they have 9s, but they spend too much time being an average game that I don't feel comfortable going above good overall. And regarding its messaging and its storytelling, valuable messaging, inelegantly done.
How about you, Sniffs?
I'm I think I would give it an 8 overall. And I just and I really just base that off of as a game, what does it ultimately do? It's just meant to be able to turn off and have fun. And there's very barely moments in the game where I was like, I'm not having fun with this. Going from, I was intrigued enough in the main storyline to get through, to go through it and be like, okay, let's see what happens next. Let's see what goes. Okay, let's see the outcome of this. And then all the side questing was actually very I thought the side questing was very I think it was well done. It didn't overstay its welcome. The things that are meant to be really quick, they're quick and done with. The one type of questing that that always bothered me just a little bit is they would treat going to have a conversation with somebody as a quest.
Yeah.
That part would bother me a little bit, mostly just from it's weird to say I'm gonna go converse with Nev because we need to talk about upcoming plans, and instead of just being instead of just maybe putting an exclamation point on your map to be hey, this is a point of interest, and go have that conversation, it's quest name, bullet point, go talk to Nev, and then that's the end of the quest.
Yeah, I think those could have been more streamlined because you don't need to have that prequel conversation. If it just showed up as a quest because that's where you are in the game, and it showed up on a map and you're like, oh, there's a new quest here, and then it triggers that conversation. Well,
I was going to say, just have it with because the game is already so designed about getting to places quickly, so you could go run through the Fade and go to the different alluvions to get to places. But why do that? You literally just open up your map and there you go straight there. And some people would slam the game for that. I honestly like it. If you're gonna build a fast travel, just let me have my fast travel. I'm okay with it. But also, anyway, just before we go into Tangent World, it's more of just I give it a solid 8. I had a lot of fun with it. I actually enjoyed it. I really did enjoy my time with it. So,
and what about you, Legion?
Oh,
A 2.
Yeah. This is a 10 out of 10. I don't know what you guys are talking about. You guys.
There's no such thing as a perfect score.
Except for Veilguard.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm with Sniffs as far as calling it at 8. I almost did an 8.5 based on some of the mechanics that are in the game. I love the sticky world where you're balancing on the beam. That's not the game. My game is not to suddenly out of nowhere have to balance on a beam. It's not Tomb Raider. I've played every single Tomb Raider, and I love that. And that's kind of part of it because you're kind of you are traversing this world. It's known that that's what you're doing. You're dungeon crawling. Dragon Age is not really like that. It's based on trying to get to the next part of the story. So it's there, but it shouldn't be the thing that prevents you from going to the next simple area. I like the ledge thing. So that whole sticky world collision stuff, I do like that. It can get in the way of some of the combat stuff. We've talked about that before, but it's so minor that I wouldn't say that it's that big of a deal because I'm in
It felt like they did a good job that they kept those particular these are combat areas, and these areas that are that sticky thing balancing on a beam or sidling on a ledge or something like that. I thought they did a good job of keeping those pretty well contained enough. I think the biggest crime of that would be something in they do it both in Treviso and in the city.
Minrathous
with ladders. that's really the only place. But I mean, don't go near the ladder and you're okay, I guess, is the moral of that story.
And then you
Yeah,
must
I
play it
think I
on
did.
controller too, because I didn't have that issue at all on mouse and keyboard, like not once. So
Yeah, I never had an issue during combat or anything like that. I did occasionally have moments where, as Banana mentioned before, the button to jump and the button to grab onto an object like a ladder would be the same button. So occasionally I'd find myself happily and really joyously running towards the zip line to traverse Treviso, and all of a sudden my character is leaping off towards their doom. That's an awkward little moment.
So like I said, I asked for you guys for like an overall score. I didn't like say like, let's talk about the story. Where would you put that and stuff? So I appreciate you guys kind of like extrapolating some of your reasons for why you gave it the score you did. But I would say like if I was focused on the story, because my background is a heavy BioWare background, but more on Mass Effect. I know a lot about Dragon Age, probably a lot more than I should know. But I'm not nearly a lore expert on that. But I definitely, playing this game, I realized how much I do know compared to the interpretation of a lot of things going into this game. Because there was a lot of people that, like you mentioned before, talking about the Illuvians. It's like, well, wait a minute. So in Dragon Age 2, we barely had one Illuvian, and it was this big deal. And now we have them all over the place just to go, we're going to go have coffee in Treviso. We're going to go to the docks in Minrathous. We're just flying all over the place just because we want to. I mean, we have a item. That dagger is Mythal's essence, basically, inside of that, allowing us to unlock these doors. We've never had that ability before or had those options before. So why is this suddenly a point of contention? Of course we would have this access now because we've never had an artifact like this before. In fact, when it was locked in the Red Lyrium, it caused a ton of disturbance in Dragon Age 2, the same game that they're specifying, where, you know, the Illuvians were pretty rare. And I really loved Marrow in that game and the whole Illuvian stuff. And I really, 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 having played it now, I love Bellara. I didn't like her at the beginning, and I kind of grew to like her a little bit more. But I still think if that was Meryl somehow in all this, that would just be so much better. You know, just it doesn't have to be the same story, obviously. It would just be Meryl in this, and she just fits that. And it would just be like a callback, and it would just fit. But yeah, I think that from a story side of things, that's where I'm at, like closer to like a 6.5. Mm-hmm. Because I know where they're going with the story. I know the lore enough to where I say, I know what they're trying to say, and maybe they didn't say it well, but I do think that they did it right. But because the execution wasn't pulled off, that's where that 6.5 comes from. Whereas all the mechanics, the way that they progress the story, where your decisions may not necessarily always matter. Like there's a mission in Minrathous where you come upon where there's two lovers, you know, but one is Antivan. One's
a Teventer, and the other one's a crow.
You got it right, exactly. Yeah. And so they're supposed to be like, oh, do we tell about this? Because we thought they were like spying on us. Turns out they're just actually communicating behind the scenes. Or do we like confront them about it and things? You know, you gotta get those options. It's not just like, this is our mission, now we're just going to tell the crows about it and that they're going to handle it. You could do it that way. So it's not really always like a choices matter type thing, but I like how the world and the side quests and stuff have like these little details that allow you to kind of, and so that's good storytelling, you know, where it's like, we know enough that would be a problem, possibly, but we don't care, or we do care, you know, so they leave that in the player's hands. That's good storytelling. So for me, like I said, the 6.5 is coming from the story, whereas a lot of the games, the game assets, I enjoyed how the gameplay was progressed along. That's closer to an 8.5. So I think overall, that's where I'm at with that 8. So
I kind of just on piggybacking off of that, like that particular moment, and it kind of makes me think about like how overall I find a lot of the like side quests, they tend to end in a positive light for the most part, or even just a neutral. Like it was really rare that you did a side quest that like ended with I think one of the I think probably a negative-ish one that probably would have come up was like in Arlethan, there's a specific, it's one of those like run around and you're turning on all the little machines, and when you finish it, it makes this like dead body apparate and just hanging in the air. And they were like, oh, they sacrificed, is some kind of thing with a demon, and Rook just goes, let's get the hell out of here. Like, and that's just how that side quest ends. But I kind of wonder if there was maybe like a directive choice to have side quests tend to finish with much more of a like at least neutral to positive light, because there's a very heavy-handed moments within the main quest line that are just like dark. They are just, or like they don't, it does not end well for people.
Right. Yeah, because you can imagine like Mass Effect 3 that has this oppressing feel for many parts of the game, that if it was like that for every single side mission, like we're constantly being beaten, we're constantly losing. I mean, at some point, I'd be like, oh, every mission I do, we seem to win but fail.
What's the point?
So, but they had a perfect balancing act with that. I'm not talking about the Citadel. I'm just saying, like within the game, there were moments, and you like grabbed onto them because it was such a different way of handling the majority of the quests, including a lot of the other side quests. But whereas this game, you might be onto something there, because there's so many dark moments or dark themes within the main quest that happen, to progress the game along. Just even Solus's story and his regrets, that some of your side missions, which are intended to be side missions, you may not do them, do end up with a little bit of a lighter feeling to them. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the main story felt probably darker than any other Dragon Age game. I think as you're progressing through this one, there's always the like looming threat of the two gods you have to deal with, and the knowledge that they are more powerful than you. Like, you are fighting at a deficit. You are in trouble, and you have to deal with that reality. So I think the idea that there's always kind of this gloom hanging over your head as you're progressing through the main story is counterbalanced by that mild positivity in all of the side quests, to feel like, yeah, we're not getting to the point where, the gods are weaker, but we're finding things to be positive about in our side quests. And that's kind of facilitating the struggle that we know exists in the main quest. We know it's an uphill battle. We know odds are not in our favor. So to find those little moments in those side quests where you can make a difference, really, it feels real to have that kind of positivity that you can latch onto and use as motivation towards what might ultimately be a fruitless effort.
This is something we've talked about before with video games and just with life generally, is that even in a time when everything is very bad and it feels like the world is caving in, good things still happen in those days, and when things aren't happening that are bad. If you think of really, really dramatic real-life examples, London during the Blitz, it wasn't constant bombing. There was a lot of it, but in between, people still went to the store, people still went out, people still met, people still made friends, people still found lovers, etc., etc., etc. This is just something you're going to find in every story ever told. My only problem was I did feel as though sometimes the game did not lose track of the overarching villain that was expected to be found towards the end of the game, but I felt as though sometimes the side quests became so clustered together that I felt like I had to do 5 or 6 in a row, and that pulled me out of the main narrative. If I could have had, and this is possibly the way I was doing them, the pace I was interacting with companions, but I felt as though if there was a way that we could have had main story 2 side missions, main story 1 side mission, main story 2 side missions, something like that, that would have been great. But especially towards the end of the game, I felt myself ending up in situations where it was main story 9 side missions, main story 12 side missions. I spent 2 evenings clearing up side missions when I thought I was at the end of the game. 2 evenings. And that
I
pulled
think
me
that
out.
kind of harkens a little bit to what I was saying earlier about like how, you know, how they handled side questing is, you know, overall really well done. But I think that also talks about like how I didn't care for going to have a conversation is treated as a quest, and I think that coincides a little bit with why the way that some of these side quests are like that, where you do a thing and then all of a sudden you have like 9 random freaking side quests, because the game is so dependent on you to go have a conversation, because without that conversation or this objective of having a conversation, it doesn't really open the door for these side quests to really happen, like, because that conversation is supposed to provide the context essentially. And so that's where I find that might be playing into kind of like why it pulls out that way.
They do a couple of things that are really interesting though, because there's some side quests you cannot do unless you advance the world story. And that's because areas are locked. And I said this in the first episode where we covered Veilguard. So I would strongly, and I was trying to do this without spoilers, I said I would strongly advise playing the game almost as intended, because you'll be surprised how much gets opened up as you do it. Now, that's not to say like it's, you know, there is some open world endedness in the game, but it's not meant to be an open world game. So if you kind of like follow the world missions first and then integrate some of your side missions, you won't ever get frustrated with like, why can't I go over there? I can't get to this bridge over here. Just play the game. Just like put yourself in the role of Rook. What would Rook do? Probably not this side mission at the moment. Probably needs to focus on like the more immediate pressing issue. If you come at it from that perspective, you'll probably be a lot less frustrated with how the flow of the story goes and some of those side missions.
Yeah, that didn't. That never really came up as an issue for me. I thought actually the game was very well designed when it came to that. And it's actually one of the main notes I put down was this big branching field of level design. I thought was really well done, and that can be in that technical level of the platforming, so to speak, and the verticality, but also the way that you do just cover the whole damn thing by doing the main quests and the side quests, or at least the vast majority.
Yeah.
I didn't really do any exploring, and I still found myself picking up that trophy for visited all areas or something similar, and looking at the maps, not really seeing any areas left over. For me, the pacing issue, it was really just, okay, now I'm at the lighthouse. How many damn exclamation points have I got to deal with before I can move on and do the main story?
I will say with the pacing issue, I definitely noticed it with the links between the main quest and the side quest. So like when I recruited Davrin, you're immediately thrown into choosing between Treviso and Minrathous as to which one you're going to go to save. I had Davrin in my party for literally one quest, and then it was, you have to make this decision, you have to go deal with this. And I really wanted to keep going with Davrin's side quest. Maybe that's just a personal choice on my part. There were Griffons in trouble. That was important to me. I wanted to go deal with that. And the game was like, no, you got to go deal with this. And that was fine. But the fact that I then afterwards couldn't go, all right, now let's get back to that problem that I want to deal with. I want this to be my priority. You can make some progress, and then you have to do more of this than the main quest. And then you can make more progress, and then you have to do more of the main quest. I feel like it limits you as a player when you actually care about something, when you let yourself get immersed to the point where like, this is what I want to be my priority moving forward, and I have to do a bunch of stuff I don't really care about to get to this. So I will say, well, like the way they integrated side quest and the main quest, I think it makes for better pacing overall. But like sometimes I just want to focus on one side story and bring that to its conclusion before I deal with anything else, and that was never an option.
Yeah. It is interesting how they kind of would do that at times, where they weaved in a natural storyline into what you're doing. But at other times, like you said, like we've said with the whole, like, you got to go talk to somebody while you're at the, at your base. and there's an option, there's an exclamation point there. It's like, oh, do I really want to go there? Because I know it's going to lead to this, and no one's going to, I really rather just do this. Am I going to lose anything if I don't talk to them? There really should have been some kind of integration of like when you come back to the base, instead of starting in front of your like Illuvian, like you're in your room and then somebody walks in or something. So that way it's flowing without it feeling like it's forced on you, because then it's just a quest that's there. You don't have to go do it at that point, but you don't have to go and make that issue for yourself. You know, you feel like you did it to yourself, you know?
I think a thing that makes, from my perspective, it makes the issues with the timing so frustrating is that generally I thought the side quests and the main quests are really good. Really good, and this is particularly for the companion side quests. Not always. If you had to go and just have the conversations, sometimes they could be a little bit grating. The real companion side quests, I thought generally were fantastic. I had some of my best times in the whole game doing that, and it's such a shame that when I look back, it's slightly coloured by the frustration over what the game was allowing me to do in that moment and what I felt the game expected me to do. Because it is true that I could bypass these side quests. That is always an option. But this doesn't feel like the kind of game where that's really a thing. If you have a gigantic game full of mini games and full of side quests that aren't related to your main characters, I feel you can ignore those. But the side quest with your companions, that feels as though it's main quest Mark II. That's stuff you really have to do to get the full story. So it is a little bit of a shame that it will always be coloured in that slightly negative light, because I thought, honestly, the game reminded me a lot of the time of Mass Effect 2.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I was just about to.
I was worried.
Mm-hmm.
I was worried that didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it really reminded me of Mass Effect 2 most of the way through. But I just felt the execution wasn't ever quite as elegant as it was in Mass Effect 2.
So what I was going to say is that Mass Effect 2, for a lot of people, not me, but for a lot of people, is peak BioWare. And it was their best game. It was the best rated game, blah, blah, blah. But one thing that me and Banana have always said is that if you play, and it's not a fault of the game, it's just the fault of us, actually, because we play on Insanity. So I have to grind out a lot of side quests intentionally, so that way I have the XP going into story portions, and you cannot successfully do that just because of your level. You don't have the equipment and you don't have the level. Even if you do every single side mission up to that point, you can't advance any further because you've done everything. You've gone to every single planet that you could, because not all the planets are opened at that point. There's just some areas that you're you have a wall, and it's a gamer wall because you're going to have to like play through that. Like, what you got is what you got, and they're very difficult areas. This game doesn't do that, though. This game, I think they've learned from Mass Effect 2 in saying, we're going to throw a dozen side missions at you before this story element. That way you don't hit that wall. So if you do have a hard time doing that, you could go back and do those things because we're giving them to you. So there is that integration of Mass Effect 2, but also parts of it where I think they learned that that's not ideal. You can kind of overlevel yourself if you want to, and learn some story stuff at the same time. I think that's great. How did you guys feel about, now that you've seen the characters in gameplay and so on and so forth, what was your favorite or maybe least favorite part of the presentation of characters, like the character creator and the clothing and the armor and stuff like that? What were some of your least and most liked?
I thought the character creator was pretty like lackluster overall. Like it was pretty generic, I guess. Like it just felt like it felt very Souls-like in the way of just like you could make somebody look pretty like milquetoast, or you could just make a freak and that's it. There's like no way, no other way around it. And then, but the armor and the weapon, like I'm a sucker for like visual candy, and the fact that you could transmog stuff so you could still get the benefit of a certain armor piece, but then transmog it to look like the thing that you want it to look like. Mwah.
Yeah, I am too. I'm a big fan
eye
of that.
candy.
Yeah,
absolute eye candy.
That was well done.
Yeah, I think to really just echo really what Sniff was saying. I thought the character creator was not great, which is strange for me when I think back to how much I really enjoyed the Inquisition character creator. I remember that, feeling like that was one of the very best I'd ever used. And then this feels like a massive regression. Go on, Sniff, what you got?
Oh, I was just going to say it was really funny how so many content creators, they were like, I'm jumping into Veilguard. And the first thing they do is they pick a Qunari and then they make them the most ugly fucking thing in the world. They just put like butt cheeks on their forehead or like, that was everybody's initial response to jumping on
Thank goodness we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this
God.
is, honestly, to echo the second point though, I did feel that I didn't have, so I played as just a human mage Grey Warden background. So they probably weren't going to look too outlandish unless I tried to make them. But pretty much every character I made came out looking like Homelander. Pretty much every single one.
That might be a personal thing. I don't know that we can hold the game responsible.
I do see Homelander everywhere outside as well. But I did feel as though there was a certain blandness to the character creator, which was a bit of a letdown. On the other hand, it was fairly easy, and this is what I wanted a character creator generally. I'm not someone who spends 10 hours in there. Normally, I want to get into the game. It was easy enough to make a pretty cool looking character and get into the game. So if you want that, I thought the blending system they had really worked. If you want a nice, strong, and in-depth character creator, this probably isn't the one for you, and you will almost certainly be disappointed.
The one big negative I have on the character creator is the choice of voices. They were not my favorite. The voice actors themselves weren't the problem. It was just the like, it's basically, it was almost as if they were like, we got two different people that sound pretty similar. Like maybe one has a little more bass in their voice than the other. And then that was it.
Well, they had a tone modulator is what they did. So it was the same voice actor.
Or did they have a switch that you could toggle and nothing fucking happened?
I would say I was underwhelmed by it.
Because I remember doing that, and I mean, maybe I just don't have the sensitivity to actually detect that, but I definitely remember picking my character's voice, toggling the pitch shifter, just saying like, oh, let's bring it down a little bit, and hearing the exact same voice. Like, did I do something wrong? Like that is definitely says lower, and nothing happened.
Well, the problem you have is that pitch shifting is a lot like auto-tune in music. A little bit of it goes a long way, but as soon as you get outside of this really narrow window in which it can work, it sounds weird. And it just won't sound right. So you should theoretically be able to max out the pitch shifter. And if they want the result to still be good, maxing it out is just going to move it a tiny, tiny bit. So I don't see, honestly, the value in that feature. If it took them 10 minutes to implement, fine, go for it. But if that took any time, that's a real shame.
We talked about that specific thing several episodes ago, and I expressed my concern about it. I said, I hope they just have male, female voice, and if they get a second one, that's okay. So 4 total. But my worry was that they were going to have 4 in the guise of really just 1 and 1 and then doing a pitch thing, because it's not going to work. I mean, it's just not. So
yeah, at that point, just don't give me the choice. I would just give me the choice of, male, female voice. Like that's a,
well, basically you have a UK voice and you have an American one, but as far as the pitch goes, they made it they presented like there's 8 voices. There's not, there's 4. And really, they should have just gotten rid of the pitch thing. Just walked away.
Yeah, I think the pitch thing, they wanted to do it right, and that was part of the problem. Like I think we're familiar with character creators and what people do with character creators to know that like almost the best thing you can do is give us a way to make our character absolute nonsense. So like if you're gonna put a pitch shifter in there, let me shift the pitch to the point where I can't understand what they're saying anymore, because that's what people are gonna do with those features.
Everybody
and what you did was give me a pitch shifter where on the voice lines that are repeated in the character creator, I can't tell the difference. So like I'll have to do multiple playthroughs to even notice the real difference with a pitch shifted voice. Just let me break everything. Just let me flick an override switch and just say like, yeah, no, this is not going to be a character who could exist in world. I'm going to make them 14 feet tall. I'm going to break everything. They're going to be running around on toothpicks that couldn't possibly support their weight. Just let me break it, because it's not that big a deal. Like, it's not that important if my character is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
The rest of the game is going to progress the same way. Nobody's responding to the creation I've put together based on the way they look. That's just for me, and let me do whatever the hell I want with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to have like collision issues, like asset problems, like because the armor won't fit, like, you know, the bosom size I'm selecting that I'm trying to select. I get that.
I think everybody who is going to make a character that is absolute nonsense is going to accept that responsibility to be like, yeah, this is not even person shaped anymore. I'm willing to acknowledge that the armor that is person shaped will not fit them appropriately.
I am pair.
Yeah, it'd be really easy to solve anyway. You can just do it essentially like they do when you go into the game and you say what you want your casual appearance to be, and it warns you for certain items if you wear it as casual wear. It might clip, it might look goofy. Give us these enormous sliders that take up the whole of the screen, for example, where it says height, and put like 2 little markers just in the middle where it says if you exceed that, then it's going to say, be warned that you can make your character this height, but in game you might end up with collision issues, texture issues, wherever.
Their face will go through every doorway, clip through it, and you'll continue playing the game.
But I think that we all know, I think you'll agree with this, based on the community and how they've responded to this game, where you take things out of context constantly to make your point, that if they had done something like that, they would get nothing but videos saying, look, see, the game's not optimized because I'm clipping through everything. My clothes are, they never fit. They wouldn't tell you, though, that that was a choice that you made and that they gave you that warning.
Yeah, but I always consider those people just bad faith in general anyway. So
exactly.
I don't.
And we've provided our audience with all of the tools they need to dismiss anybody else's review. So I think we've already covered that one.
Everyone that's not us, they're bad. They're bad faith actors.
If they disagree with you, fuck them.
I just want to share what was in my mental image of saying that you've made a character too tall, and now I wish BioWare had the balls to let you do that, and not only do that, but like you make yourself too tall for any doorway, and they animated so that way in a cutscene, if you hit your head on something, the character goes, oh shit, and just like constantly hits their head on something.
In literally every single scene, they punish you for having chosen that height.
Yeah, no.
Your character's just waiting outside while a conversation happens.
It could have
I'm on board with this. Yeah,
it's just an off-camera thing. It could be everybody else walked in, and then you just hear your character in the background go, "Ow."
Yeah, because nobody I think a lot of people do enjoy the character creator in Cyberpunk, but there are minimal and maximum standards that aren't necessarily egregious either. I mean, yes, the size of your dong can be is.
Keep it classy.
I mean, but as far as like even like chest size, I would say like they say large, but that's they're big. But
you're gonna give a lot of people body issues if you carry on.
Well, I guess for the cyberpunk argument, I would say like it's a world of augmentation already.
Yes,
so to say that somebody has like very naturally large breasts in a time of something that's all about robotic augmentations, like of course somebody would be like, I'm gonna just make the biggest ballistics ever, or I'm gonna just cut them all off.
Fuck it, why not make it so you have to pay for it? Go buy an augment, go buy some robo tits and really fucking snack them out,
I actually saw quite a few things on Twitter where larger individuals were saying like, actually my chest size is really large, and if I want to create myself in game, I can't. So it's not a matter of body image thing. It's just a matter of like, just give them the option.
Yeah, I would say the limits on those things were probably along what you were saying with like clipping issues with armor, and I can't imagine BioWare as inclusive as they are, wanted to give anybody body issues. They wanted to say, like, you should fit this stereotype. I think they were just like, we didn't want to dig into the technical aspects of getting all of our armor and all of our models to fit every body type. So we put limits on them. But that's exactly where I'm saying you should have that override option to be like, hey, I know this is going to cause you issues in terms of the way you represent your models and clipping. I'm okay with that. I want my character to look a little more extreme than your limits put on that character. And if it doesn't look perfect, I'm okay with that.
It's just the way you were saying it just reminded me of like just like a punk kid. Like, don't fit in your system, man.
I'm trying to find like the right words to be like gentle about this, and extreme was a weird way to go with it.
You spelled it just with the X at the start, right?
Yeah. It's like XTREEM. Perfect. Nailed it.
Well, I heard the things that you did like, Banana. Is there anything that you didn't like at all?
I mean, we've already talked about that lack of an override switch to say that, like, these are lore accurate skin tones, things like that. I would have liked an override to say, yeah, my character's not lore accurate.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like, I think it was, as we've said, kind of an okay character creator. It got the job done. Nobody's really pissed off about it.
Yeah.
It definitely could have been better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say no one. I'm sure the internet is full
Yeah.
of it.
I mean, people who have never played the game are pissed off about it. So
Yeah.
I am.
yeah, there's definitely somebody, but
I think I agree with everything y'all said. I think the one thing that I did not like is the Qunari overall presentation. Because there's a consistency there. We know what Sten looks like in Origins, which is without horns. We get that. But then they retcon some of that, and that's okay. But in Dragon Age 2, we have a very distinct look of what the Qunari are. In Dragon Age 3, that kind of continues with Iron Bull and a lot of other Qunari that we run into. There's a very consistent type look, very harsh, very, triangular features. The horns are, for the most part, branching out. They're not like curved back like goat horns or anything like that, which I get that there's a lore reason why, because if they're from dragons, then they have different features too. So I'm okay with that, but they didn't really explore that they at all. I dove deep into it, trust me. But the features that they have in the character creator for your own character, they seem to have wanted to like meet somewhere in the middle, which didn't work for me. Like, yeah, I need an extreme look for an extreme race because they don't come from the same group of elves or humans or dwarves. They're their own thing. So why not just embrace that side of it? So they shouldn't be like human looking dragon things. They should be what they look like. And so there should be some like opportunity to, scale that somewhat, but to just make them, because to me, they just look like humans with horns a lot of times.
Did you play the game as a Qunari?
No, I made a character or two just to kind of like scale it out, just to kind of see what I could do. But
I asked that because I was curious because I haven't played as a Qunari, but I recall like when playing Inquisition, when you could choose to play as a Qunari character, they actually like a lot of people's dialogue is toward you of being like, why in the hell is the Herald of Andraste a Qunari? Like that's the most ironic shit ever. And I was curious if anybody had played a Qunari in this game, if there was any kind of like thing like, if they ever explored that, but I would highly doubt that they did because it feels pretty like no matter who Rook is, everybody kind of reacts to Rook about the same. They tend to react more not about your race, but they tend to react more about your past scenario, like whatever group or faction that you hail from, the reason that you left that group, people acknowledge that more than you just being your race or your sex or anything like that, which I guess would be the better message anyway. It's all about more your actions and what you did versus
I think it fit more in Inquisition because you are the Herald of Andraste.
Yeah.
There's a title that's associating you with something specific that people
Yeah.
already have
There's that
preconceptions about.
religious.
And in Veilguard, you're Rook. You're somebody Varric recruited to get shit done. Who can get shit done? Literally anyone. So like it doesn't really matter who you are. It matters, like you were saying, the choices you've made, your past experiences, the way you've gotten things done in the past is much more indicative of your role as Rook than as the Herald of Andraste.
From a lore standpoint, from a lore standpoint, I mean, if without Veilguard, that makes sense. Like, why is the Herald of Andraste Qunari? But with Veilguard, it doesn't matter because we don't really know what we should know about Andraste. Andraste may just have been a figment of our imagination at the end of the day. So it kind of makes sense. Why can't it be the Herald of Andraste? Because Andraste really isn't that important at the end of the day. So
yeah, I think really what you're seeing there, though, when we talk about if you play as a Qunari, for example, the game world doesn't, as far as we know, react to you in a particularly Qunari fashion. If you play as an elf, as a dwarf, there's very, very small, if any, amounts of dialogue that directly reflect this in people's reactions to you. And this is something where you would have, for example, games like Dragon Age Origins. They felt very different if you were playing as a dwarf. And I think you're just seeing the evolution, for good or for bad, of just modern gaming. It tends to lead us away from that more historical Dungeons and Dragons based gaming system where your character race makes a huge difference, or your character gender makes a huge difference. We tend to put those as just these blank canvas slates, and then you build your character on top of that. And you see it in the Fallout series too. I mean, if we go way, way back and think of all the skill-related dialogue options, which were then slowly phased out, and by the time you get to Fallout 4, I don't even know if there are any.
Charisma, that's about it.
Just about it, yeah.
That is it. It's just charisma.
Yeah, I think you're just seeing the evolution of mainstream gaming, and I don't mean this in a bad sense really in any way, towards simplicity rather than that vast amounts of depth and choice in each conversation. And I don't know if this is a result of games becoming ever increasingly more complex to create and design. I don't know if this is a case of developers becoming lazier, because that doesn't actually make any sense. Why would suddenly a generation of developers be lazier? I don't know whether that's trying to get games out quicker rather than waiting for the vast amount of development time that this would now require to have all of this extra dialogue for characters who look different, who have their different backgrounds. And that's, I think just reflected in the fact that really all you have in this game that you select in that character creation screen that then you carry with you and affects the game in any way is some dialogue options related to your class, which not your class, but your background, which don't really alter NPC dialogue in a huge way. It's more just they had to get the main character actor to record some extra lines, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It has zero bearing because, like, whatever faction you hail from, they give you a faction bonus as far as like the loyalty of that faction increases quicker because you're originally from that faction. But I always find that it, you can kind of sort of direct whether you left on good or bad terms with said faction, and yet you can always have a loyalty bonus regardless of whether it is good or bad. It's just kind of it's sort of an odd one. I would say that I think that might be one of the negative feedback from people, especially when it comes to the subject of that kind of subject material. When you go back to Dragon Age Origins they took a dark world fantasy setting and they would also try to address the dark parts of our own world in some way to bring up things of sexism, racism, whatever it is, and see how people how do you react to that in the face of it. And I think people hunger for that. I think people really do want to address these really heavier issues, but they kind of get washed away over time in this current culture climate of, companies are wanting to make their money, and they're only going to make that money by casting the widest net possible.
Perhaps it's the natural evolution of any IP.
Yeah.
You can take more risks with your first. I've got the word production in my head. That's a weird word to use for a game. With your first game, there's a word. You can take more risks with your first game as you try to establish your name, because you don't have a name to lose. You don't have a name to ruin.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps just as these series continue on, the natural progression for them is to just, now that we are established, try not to lose what we already have and try and cast that net a little bit wider. And yeah, I do miss, to a degree, games with that wider range of choice, with those background stories, with those skill checks in dialogue and things like that. But that wasn't made for me. If you are playing Veilguard and you're disappointed it's not Origins, I'm sorry, but Dragon Age hasn't been Dragon Age Origins since Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
Dragon Age 2 already changed a lot. Dragon Age Inquisition already changed a lot. Dragon Age Veilguard has done it again. I feel as though the Dragon Age series, not quite to the extent, I feel as though the Dragon Age series has more in common with Final Fantasy series than it does with Mass Effect series. That each game iterates on what came before it in a more drastic way than Mass Effect did. Mass Effect maintained a very consistent tone and feel. Okay, 1 to 2 is quite a big jump, but 2 and 3, you can almost just transition from one to the other without even really feeling like you've changed game. And if you're playing now on that Legendary Edition, where you just sort of flick through a menu, it's almost like you're playing the same damn game. Try and do that with Final Fantasy 7, then 8. And then 8 and then 9, and then 9 and then 10. The systems change, the way the game looks change, the art style changes, everything changes. And it feels to me as though Dragon Age is a bit more like that. Each game doesn't have that much in common with the other. The big distinction, of course, with Final Fantasy, though, is that they do have the established world. They do all exist within this one common lore foundation. I'm speaking purely from a game tone, game feel, gameplay perspective.
Well, it feels like it feels just like our current day of just like it's modernizing. Like the people, the land of Thedas is modernizing. Like it's growing as a society, and like because these giant cataclysmic event, like the world is going to adapt so quickly when that world is thrown into cataclysmic events over and over again. Dragon Age Origins, you have probably the biggest blight that they had at the time. Not only that, but huge political turmoil with Loghain turning against the king and all of that. And then you have Dragon Age 2, which is where you start getting like the whisperings of Red Lyrium. You have Corypheus kind of working in the background. You have I forget what like the main villain of the like Qunari, what's his name?
The Arashok.
The Arashok. You have the Arashok coming in and that particular style of the invasion. Then Inquisition, you have the biggest cataclysmic thing, which is a fucking hole ripping through reality. And now, how do you top that? Oh, we have three ancient gods that essentially saw the beginning of the world, beginning to unravel our world. So like naturally the world is just progressing so much quickly. It's progressing quickly for us because we're living it. It's been what 20 odd years since Dragon Age Origins, right? It came out 2008?
Yeah, it's about 16 years ish.
So we're getting close to like 20 years, and how much has already progressed just in that short amount of time, whereas we're looking at just maybe 10-ish years in like as far as the lore is concerned with Thedas. The amount of time between each game, time is like 2 to 3 years. Like the events of Veilguard is about, I think, like 3 years after all this stuff of Inquisition.
I looked it up once and I just don't remember, but it's probably
not
less than that.
long.
It's like
It's not a
year and a
very
half.
super long time.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly it.
sorry, I was just saying, you look at the presence of Varric throughout these games. The fact that he's always there, roughly the same age, just getting a bit older,
Yeah.
gives you an idea. It's not a huge gap in between. Sorry, Banana.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I think that's really it though. Like we've played through each of these 4 games now, and you see the progression through the story of that game, and then give it a couple of years to let those events simmer, then move into the next game. They all feel like they're not a tremendous amount of time between them, but I mean, look at the way our world changes from year to year. Big events have tremendous impact, and things that felt important 20 years ago don't matter at all. So when you look at the things that happen in these Dragon Age games, in Dragon Age Origins, you're introduced to the Qunari. You have the opportunity to ask Sten a bunch of questions about Qunari culture and where he comes from. And then you're really never given that opportunity as you move into Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. It feels like not only the player, but everyone within the world of Thedas has learned. They've all kind of gotten the opportunity to gather that information and form new opinions. So when you get to Veilguard, the 4th entry in the series, it feels like universally people care less about the things that don't really matter. And it fits the lore of the world they've created for people to be like, oh, you're a Qunari. Cool. Not that big a deal anymore. I've gotten used to it. We can move forward. So in Veilguard, I feel like, yeah, you'll still find those outliers who are rigidly against, a race of people, but it's much more common to find people who don't care one way or another.
It's really funny too, because I was when I was playing the other day, and there was a line that I didn't hear the first time I played it, because it's one of those random shopkeeps in Treviso, and it's a Qunari shopkeep, and he sells like alcohol. That's it. And I think you could buy like some kind of, I don't know, like a decoration for your room, for Rook's room. And I hit the like back out button. I made my purchase. I backed out, and I'm about to walk away. And he says a line about being like, I'm glad that the Antom are here. People look at me, like people are treating me more with respect now.
There's another one in Treviso, another Qunari merchant, who says something almost like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
If you're a Qunari and you buy from her, she says it's nice to finally see a Qunari who's not part of the Antom. It's reflective of kind of the real world. You'll have people on both sides of that fence to say that like, oh, this occupation works, and oh, this occupation makes me look like an asshole.
Yeah. So I don't have the time or the energy to go over the Qunari lore in this podcast, but it's very significant, and how they're portrayed ties a direct role in one of the more polarizing characters in Taash, because in Origins, even, like I said, I'm not specifically talking about Sten, we have a lot of characters that have preferences. Zevran apparently has no preference whatsoever to anything. he'll get with anybody, but there are preferences. And even when we get to Inquisition, there are characters that have preferences as far as romance goes. And that's nothing new. BioWare is not rewriting these issues. So I thought what was really interesting when it came to the whole non-binary thing with Taash, and I'm not going to that's not my point on that, is that a lot of people wanted to focus on like how that dialogue seemed so unnatural and out of place. And I would say like it probably could have been written a little bit better. But what the mother goes on to say is like she couldn't understand what she was saying because she had a different word for it, and they weren't communicating because the term was different. And then when she understood the term, she was like, oh. So it's like, I can speak Spanish and English and study German. I'm not nearly as good as Com, of course. But if I had heard a word in Spanish, and then like I'm talking to Com in German, he's going to be like, I don't understand what that word means. And then he tells me what it is. I'm like, oh, Well, it's that term. So we're just not communicating because the language is different. And that's what was going on in that scene. And I think that's often missed, is that they didn't give enough credit. The writers weren't given enough credit, I should say, because like I said, I thought it could have been written just slightly better. There's a different way they could have done that. But they did give you the context of like, this is a Qunari culture. We're staying in this lane. And that makes that conversation relevant. Whereas everybody just wants to focus on the English or the whatever language you heard and focused on what she actually said versus how the lore made that significant. So anyway.
Well, honestly, it is the biggest mountain from a molehill storm in a teacup issue I've ever heard in my life. It's such a minor point. If I can just have a moment about Taash. So first of all, that scene, it was clunky in the sense that a lot of the dialogue in the game was clunky. I don't think it's a game that I'll ever look back on and think, wow, that was beautifully written, that was incredibly written. I think it suffers on that account all the way through. It wasn't bad. It was clunky. It was a bit awkward from time to time. The big complaint that you just addressed was people would say it doesn't fit into the culture in the game in that moment. And why are they using a word that we would use and not a Qunari word, for example? As you went right on to say, they immediately follow up by saying, oh, there is a Qunari word for this. Why doesn't Taash use that word in the first place? Because she didn't, because they didn't, you know what I mean? Because they didn't know that word. I'm trying, because they didn't know that word. And they picked it up from the Shadow Dragons, I believe. It was from the discussion with a different culture, and they were bringing that word across. So it makes sense that there would be this collision in language. And the reason that Taash didn't really know this word is the whole fucking main arc of Taash's storyline. Taash's arc is not about being non-binary. It's about being a first-generation fucking immigrant into a new culture and finding where your identity lies between those two places. Taash's storyline is that.
I think that is another reason why I don't give that a ton of, or I don't give the writers a ton of credit for the way they handled Taash's story. Is because I feel like they tried to do too much with Taash.
They put a lot on Taash. They put too much in that basket.
I think, having a character who is torn between cultures, torn between gender identities, and dealing with a parent who was never supposed to be a parent, it's just too much. Like you're having one character take on the responsibilities for deciphering so many social issues that it all gets kind of dirty and messy and clunky, and you end up with like, none of that was satisfying.
And to really like pepper on top of that, like Taash, and we talked about this, Banana, but like I saw Taash is a emotionally stunted character.
Oh yeah.
They try to grow emotionally. Like if you romance Taash, you can try to help push and get them to express their emotions in a more constructive way, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But like, Taash is just very emotionally stunted, and that is to play a part in the like Qunari culture that we have come to learn and know. And like that's why when I would see videos of people bitching and moaning about how poorly written that coming out scene is, it's like, no, it's very clear, because people one of the biggest stupidest points that I've ever heard, people would go, nobody talks like this, because Taash just walks in, puts dinner down, and goes, so I'm non-binary. And people go, nobody talks like that. And I go, yes, there are people that do, and it's people that are very emotionally stunted, and they don't know how to communicate very clearly. That's Taash. That's Taash. Taash is not a good communicator. Has no control over their own emotions. That's another big thing in Taash, is like the whole like, I have a dragon living inside of me, and I have to decide whether or not I want to let this out or not. Like, it's just so many eggs in that basket.
If you're your natural person, but you're kind of told inside voice, you're constantly put down for you being you. I get it, but that is Taash her whole entire life. There's no malice by her mom. I mean, there is a consequence if she actually does, because she'll be found by the Antom. She won't be able to actually integrate within the Ravani culture. There's so many reasons that are justified by the mother, that the mother has nothing but care and interest for her daughter.
Yeah.
But it gets turned into, as she gets older, an inability to correlate those factors because she wasn't raising herself. She was being raised, and she only sees one side of that coin.
You also see as well that Taash is really wants to get some of this out, and it's normally being sort of dropped onto Rook rather than being dropped onto the mother. And there's multiple occasions where Taash wants to get this out of their system. So you have to add the fact that this is someone who's very socially awkward, emotionally stunted, and also it's bottling up, and they just want to get the damn thing out. I've done it in real life myself. I can remember a girl I had a crush on years and years ago that I wanted like to say it for ages, and I could like never get it out because I was just feeling shy. And the moment comes, you're like, oh, fuck this. Nope. And then one day when doing the most irrelevant thing, I suddenly broke out like the full like diatribe, like the speech, because I said, I can't hold this down anymore. And yeah, no one normal does talk like that. But in that moment when this is all backed up, in that moment when you're someone who struggles to get these things out, it's unsurprising. Like I said, I still didn't really enjoy the scene, and I didn't enjoy a lot of the dialogue throughout the game. But I think you can defend it. You can justify it.
It makes it worse because the moment leading into Taash coming out is the mother her mother is like grilling your ass and being like, you need to step off of Taash, like especially if you're trying to romance her. Them, it's very much like, I need you to back off. You're not good for Taash. Taash is gonna be whatever. Like there's a weird sour moment from the mother, and so for then Taash to come in, like it's a weird. It's not from a directing standpoint. If we were just to set this up as like a play or a movie, I'd be like, why are we directing it this way?
So
why are we doing it?
I think a lot of the dialogue with Taash specifically, and there's like, I could even include Balara here, but I think things are done smart, done really intelligently from a lore standpoint, from a background standpoint, from all those. But then you actually have to have the technical, creative ability to integrate that story in your dialogue and your writing. And that's the part that was missing. So I think where there's a lot of criticisms over that scene due to, the nature of the conversation and how it was presented. I think overall, I may be assuming too much here, but I think overall we're looking at it from I think it was done correctly, but we didn't like it because from a creative standpoint, could have been done better.
Yeah. I think if you look at that situation, I think it's that muddying of the waters to have everything kind of come together in that one moment. So Tash's growth as, an exile, somebody who's more or less been living in secret their entire life, and they are dealing with this being torn between two cultures. So they have all of the teachings of the Qun and the teachings of the Ravani, which are way less strict, and they're trying to find balance there. And then to add in this gender identity, it really feels like if you're going to take a stand on a controversial subject, you almost need that to be the cleanest part of your game, to say like, let's not complicate this anymore because people are already going to deliberately misunderstand the message we're trying to send here. And they went and complicated it as much as possible. And that is why you still have people who are just like, no, this is crap. This is bad writing. And it's not. It's not exceptional writing, because I think there were definitely better ways to handle it. But it's very consistent across the board with all of the issues that Taash is dealing, that this is how they went about handling all of those situations. I just feel like if you're going to give Taash all of this extra baggage with all of the issues they're dealing with, maybe they're not the character to have this gender identity discussion, because they're already dealing with so many other issues. And it just feels like the culture that we exist in, it was not ready for the complications that came with Taash.
Yeah.
It's a very complex, very multifaceted character. And if we're already having people review bomb this game because it even used the words gender identity, then they are not going to be willing to investigate the nuance of this conversation with a complicated character. They need it black and white to make it make sense.
I can add one little thing on top of that, which is broad strokes agreeing. But I think one of the weaknesses of Taash that has almost given them an extra target on their back, although they didn't fucking need one, there have already been plenty, is that this should be a complicated character. But none of the individual issues get really enough time and enough, love is the wrong word, enough dedication to them. None of the individual issues ever really get a time to be dealt with in any sort of interesting way. So they could have been. I just felt that they dropped the ball on Taash, which is a shame because we could really do with that.
Yeah, I genuinely think that some of the, like, I think for the style of game that Veilguard is, which is meant to be an RPG with some faster paced elements, like the idea is we really want to try to like clip along, like we really want to try to get from point to point to point, and to have a side character that gets so bogged down with a multitude of topics that holds up a lot of things and can wind up slamming a character. I think, like, I think those are subjects that are really interesting to talk about and to explore, but they could, some of the, like the gender identity thing, I think could have easily gone to somebody like Balara, or you could have even played around with it with possibly like Nev, who Nev is the person to introduce Taash to people that she knows that identify as non-binary. It just, because I don't know, like I feel like there are characters that, while they have things to explore to bring to the table, they don't really necessarily bring a ton. Like they could have given them a little bit more baggage along the way.
Yeah. I think, and I have a little bit of an advantage here because I did talk to Sniffs about this before this discussion. But
yeah,
I think I completely agree that having a character like Balara handle the gender identity crisis fits with her story so well. And Balara is not a complicated character. Balara is pretty one-dimensional throughout the game. Her story is even a bit cliched.
Her side story is the one that I'm like, I rolled my eyes about, with the whole thing with her brother. That one was just so, like, we could go on a whole other tirade on that one, but like, yeah. Anyway,
I felt her story was so unengaging, and if you were to present Balara as the character who tackles this gender identity issue, I feel like it just fits so well to say that Balara and her brother were very close. She lost her brother, and it would have made a lot of sense to say that the rest of the Veil Jumpers respected her brother and a lot of the qualities that he had. And if you tie those things to the idea of gender, to say that like the Veil Jumpers respected masculine qualities about Balara's brother, and then showcase that Balara has all those same qualities because she was so close to her brother, that maybe it makes a lot of sense for her to question the idea of, why are those qualities masculine? Why is it that when people see those qualities in my brother, they praise them, and when they see them in me, it feels wrong? That would have been a much more effective discussion, and it would have made her story matter, because I did not care about her story. When her brother reappeared, I was like, oh, this is dumb. I don't care about this person.
Her brother showed up.
I don't even know if this is the real person.
Her brother showed up, and I was like, I hope to God she gets the chance to fucking kill him.
Bro,
she's the one that drives the knife in his eye. Like,
I had exactly the same reaction to that I've been through before, which is my reaction to Marika being revealed as Radagon in Elden Ring, when my reaction was just, who the fuck is that guy?
That was a good one.
A spoiler alert for Elden Ring. Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as if
that'd be
people know how spoilers at Elden Ring work.
Yeah.
You couldn't spoil that game to someone who's put like 75 hours into it and hasn't finished it yet. You still get to the end and think, what the fuck just happened? But I think then we can really sum up Taash just very quickly. It's bold ambitions, possibly overcrowded, and slightly hamstrung by some of the more general clunkiness throughout the game. Certainly doesn't deserve all of the opprobrium that it gets. That they get don't necessarily deserve all the praise that we might like to give.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of like go along with that as far as in a nutshell. You know, I have the numbers here, but as far as picking the culture for Taash, what did y'all choose, the Qunari or Ravani?
Ravani.
I think I
Ravani as well.
picked Ravani if I remember.
I figured. Yeah, I chose Qun because she's Qunari. This is not a question for me. I was like, you're going to be Qunari. They're very strong race unto themselves. They're a very mysterious race, and they have a place for themselves. It's kind of like, do I choose Elvish culture or do I choose Ravani culture? Well, you're going to be an Elvish. To me, it was like a non-question for me. But I wasn't surprised by the answers because overall, of all the up to about 4 days ago, I think BioWare released a thing saying 79% chose Ravani and 21% Qunari.
It felt as though that was the right answer in the sense of just the game was pushing you towards that. And on the same note, actually, my thought perspective was similar to yours, but I went down the other path, which was Taash is Qunari. And that's always there in the blood and in the soul. The culture is being now something different, which is why I felt that they could be opened up to taking on the Ravani culture while still remaining Qunari.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, go back and choose Qunari because there's some really nice little interesting tidbits about it when you do go down that path.
I think it's one of those situations where I think of the Qunari and specifically the Qun the way Star Trek approaches Klingon culture. Klingon culture represents essentially a subset of human culture. And it's usually the highly militaristic, highly rigid, structured society with this overemphasis on glory. And I feel like the Qun has that same kind of mentality, like very rigid structure, very focused on the military and glory in combat. And it's presented in this way that, like, these are the things that we overemphasized in our own past. So it feels appropriate to reject them in this world. And especially with the person that Taash is, rejecting highly rigid structures feels appropriate because Taash is all the evidence you need to say that all of the rules that you've set up in the past are stupid because they tried to tell me to be somebody I'm not. And it just makes the most sense to me to say that, like, you are trying to define people before they even know who they are. That is fundamental to the Qun. And that is a huge part of why Taash has all of this baggage. It feels appropriate for her to say that I'm not going to embrace a culture that told me who I was before I knew who I was. I'm going to embrace a culture that told me to be free from all of the expectations that were placed on me by people who never made any effort to get to know me.
But I will say this, the Qunari don't know how to approach their culture because people like Taash are not in their culture. That was the central point of it, of her exploring who she was and by, unlocking that tablet. The tablet says
people like Taash are not in their culture because people like Taash are not allowed in their culture.
No, they're allowed. The Qun is allowed, not the Antam. The Antam basically integrated them in a self-serving way. The Qun,
the Antam knew that Taash could breathe fire, she would be part, or they would be part of the Antam.
We keep seeing
the Qun places her in a role where she is not allowed to embrace the freedom to choose who she is because of a gift she was born with.
No, that's the Antam. That's what I'm saying. The Antam are a subsect that have removed themselves from the Qun. The Qun,
recently,
yeah.
The Antam were defined by the Qun originally. The Antam we meet in Thedas, in Veilguard, have rejected the Qun. But Sten was part of the Antam, and Sten embraced the Qun. The Antam exist because of the Qun, and then the ones we meet in Veilguard reject it. They are a subset of the Antam.
For the Dragon Age 2 kind of makes it clear that there you do have groups that have separated, but the Qun themselves, the one out of Parvolan, aren't the ones dictating these things out. Like the Arishok in Dragon Age 2 is working on it of his own accord, but he says he's part of the Qun, but he's not.
It's getting very complicated.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The Qun is this rigid structure that has no flexibility, and that's why you you have people rejecting it. That's also how you have the Antam who embrace the Qun redefining what the Qun means. Is you have this rigid structure that doesn't fit a lot of different situations, and that opens it up to corruption to say that, like, oh, this is how we would handle this situation that's never explicitly defined in our code of rules. And that's where you run into issues like what you run into with Taash, where, oh, the Qun has something that defines what we should do with Taash. No, it doesn't. And to embrace a rigid structure that doesn't account for every possibility is stupid. That's how you're going to end up telling people things based on absolutely nothing.
It does, though, because of the fact that that tablet exists. The tablet exists, and it was written by the Qun. So it's just, there's not very many people who have been around like Taash. So they can't, they're looking for something that they don't even know what it manifests as. So when you find someone like that,
yeah,
now
that's
they can...
exactly it. They're like, this is an anomaly they didn't plan for, but there are rules for it. No, there aren't, because you didn't plan for it.
Because she's intended to lead the Qunari into the proper way of being what the Qunari should be, which may be not what the current Qunari is. And that's what the tablet's saying.
You belong to the Antam. You should have been ours. Instead, the priest stole you away. The Antam could have made you strong, but your mother hid you away, made you hide the fire. What did she tell you? Shakra-to-Ebra! You struggle against yourself, little dragon. You do not deserve this. It contains a message from our ancestors. The full words can be revealed by a dragon's fire. With this, we will prove we were meant to rule this world!
You are wrong, Atashak. Shakra-to-Ebra is not an order to struggle against what you are. It is a reminder that through struggle you find what you are. And you have never done so. Evatash has. They are stronger than you will ever be.
I got word from a Qunari linguist. Not Antam, real Qunari. She can translate the tablet for me. Wants to meet on my beach in Ravane.
You need company?
Maybe. Yeah. Just let me know when you're free.
There are others here as well. Up the beach.
Yeah, it's okay. We came to meet them.
Qunari, not Antam, but real Qunari, like us. Their little ship avoided the Antam. They asked how I was. They told me I could go back to Parvolan with them, if I wanted.
Sounds like the Qunari are pressuring you.
No, they are not the Antam. They asked if it would help me. I think that I'm ready.
You are Evatash and Rook. Shathan, who served as your Tamasran, was a friend to me.
You study ancient Qunari language like Shathan did?
Yes, I study both the language and the culture of the first expedition. My hope is that by learning more of the first expedition, we can improve our understanding of ourselves.
Are you really going to be able to help Karash like you offered?
Yes, the Antam hurt many in the Qun when they launched their invasion on the south. Karash will go to those who heal the mind. It speaks well of Shathan that she helped him.
It's an honor to meet someone who has studied the first expedition.
Shathan was the most knowledgeable of us. Thank you for sending her notes.
Sure.
You wish to know of the tablet. Before I give you the translation, I must explain. What you learn here, I ask that you hold to yourself. What is there is sacred.
I wouldn't have learned it without Rook.
Then we will respect your trust. The tablet's message must only be spoken. It must not be written down.
So that's why you couldn't just send a letter?
Yes, the tablet warned us against doing so. I remember the words, but please, bring your fire to the tablet so that I can show you. By Dragon's fire, these words are revealed. Trust no story not hidden this way. When the adversary came, we mixed our blood with dragons to fight. Protect those with fire. They see what we cannot. We fled across the sea, but there is no safety here. We have sickened, and will soon die. If more of us come from across the sea, then the adversary will follow. Beware the devouring storm.
Sounds like the ancient Qunari had some trouble of their own.
Whatever else is unclear, this offers proof that Taash and others like them should hold a place of honor under the Qun. We were wrong to send them to the Antam as simple soldiers. And Shathan was right in taking you from us. She succeeded where we failed.
And she died for it.
Hey, Taash.
All that work, all the ancient Qunari crap that she died for. And what's the secret? More work? More responsibility? She can't just leave me with this. She can't just leave me.
What would she say if she were here right now?
Complaining will not solve the problem. Have I taught you so poorly that you cannot deal with this yourself?
Ah, Shathan.
I miss her.
But you can do this.
Yeah. I can. The Qunari thought I was a mistake. The Dragon King thought I was a weapon. Shathan was the only one who believed in me. The Qunari want me to help them, protect them. What do I do with that?
You're the Adari. It's up to you.
Thanks. We need the Qunari ready for whatever comes next. Whether it's the devouring storm or something else. They need to be united.
Most of the Antam broke away from the Qun, including any other Adari.
Then we need to get them back. And the Antam. They don't know how to live outside the Qun.
That's a good start.
I'm gonna make the Qun more like what it's supposed to be. What she taught me it was. I can do that for you. Tama.
It ultimately feels like at the end of this story, the whole point is that the Qun almost seems like it was meant to be dissolved. When you find out that the Qun led to that tablet, which defines Taash as somebody who can redefine what the Qun is, it almost feels like the whole point was this needs to be readdressed. We need to figure out who we are multiple times over. We need to constantly be looking at who we should be. And you don't build a rigid structure that tells you to be flexible. That's not how that works. That's the exact opposite of what a rigid structure does.
It's kind of a good thing that we had the Qunari to begin with, because with them being so close at Parvolan, which is very close to where Taventer is and whatnot, otherwise, you have the shadow dragons that are fighting against Tevinter, but really it's almost like a losing battle. You have Antiva, who's been constantly fighting, and if it wasn't for all these things in addition to the Qunari, it's very possible that the Tevinter could just take over northern Thedas without a problem, and then Ferelden would be next. And it's always like this, like even that was whole Corypheus's thing, make Tevinter great again. That was his whole thing. That was his whole reason for coming back. But like I said, so you have this like impression that the Qunari are really actually the break stop to prevent Tevinter from going where they're at. And it, like I said, thank goodness for them, because otherwise you wouldn't have Antiva the way it is now. You wouldn't have the ability to even approach the Wardens anymore. They would just be absorbed by the Tevinter group. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say that the Qunari play a role in the development of Thedas, but like their culture is not a huge part of that role that they've played, beyond the fact that their culture values military organization. They are not defending the world of Thedas against Tevinter because of their culture.
Well, yeah, and you can't actually have, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you can't have a Qunari group in Tevinter and become, we are the Qunari, this is our culture in place, and expect to be successful. They try to do that in Dragon Age 2, and how that worked out. But I guess, they're immigrants like a lot of the other ones are, and I guess that's how Veilguard kind of like try to like integrate them into this story. But yeah, I do think the Qunari, they have their own, I don't think we disagree about that. I think they do have their own cornerstone of storytelling, but I think Taash is part of that. So, yeah.
I kind of wish that we as players could experience the Qunari not in a secondhand fashion. Like we actually get to, like, how in Origins, when you picked your race, like right. You got to live your backstory a little bit. Like one of my favorites is picking the dwarves. I don't particularly like playing dwarves because I don't like how dwarves look. I think they look really stupid all the time, like in any genre. But
no offense, Harding. Yeah.
But the backstory, but the backstory and understanding the political minutia of Orzammar was so interesting, and it was really cool. And so I feel like we miss out quite a bit by not being able to pick a Qunari from the homeland essentially, and experiencing the Qun firsthand.
Yeah.
In that light, that's the one thing I kind of wish, because since Dragon Age 2 onward, we've spent so much time with the Qunari as an antagonistic force almost, and yet we never really get to actually understand or experience it outside of just from more of like secondhand experience. And we get to meet people like Iron Bull and the Arishok and the Antom and Taash and her mother. Like we experience all of these people, all of these other Qunari outside of control of the Qun in general. Iron Bull follows the Qun, like he's pretty rigid. He stays within that structure pretty heavily, but even then he's quite a bit of an outlier.
Yeah, in Dragon Age 2, of course, you have the DLC with the Felicia Day's character. And I think that did a really good job of actually explaining how the Qun really actually operates from the inside, because she's never told you have to be this way or you will get 20 lashes. It's a choice, and they can follow that choice. And a lot of them, I would say the overwhelming majority, 80, 90%, go along with it, not because they have to. It's just because it makes the most sense for their culture to assist one another in order to grow into what they do on a daily basis. So they're not being told, it's like, look, your job is to be a farmer. It's not socialism like that. It's like, look, we see your talent, we know what you're good at. yeah we see
shall we maybe tackle a different subject? I feel we've gotten very bogged down in the minutiae of the
absolutely not. So what we're so
I rolled my eyes.
I appreciate you asking very politely, but fuck you.
So I was going to take that into a different direction, but yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like like you mentioned before, like it would be great to know the origins, and I think if BioWare could do it all over again, they probably would. They probably would include a Qunari, but I don't think it was like one of those things like romancing Garrus in 1. The BioWare didn't think anybody would want to romance him, so it wasn't an option. But then they got this overwhelming request for it, so now you can romance him in 2. So it was kind of like that.
I think the exercise with the Qun throughout the game.
Oh, kill me.
Sorry, is you're presented with the Qun immediately with Sten, and Sten gives you a list of very rigid rules that he follows. And then every game you're introduced to a Qunari who is an outlier. So the whole point of the Qun is to reject the Qun. Like that is the way it's presented to us throughout 4 games, is that the whole point is to figure it out for yourself. So
I hate that I'm going to add something onto this fucking.
Oh, come on.
Isn't the Qun also quite?
I can't believe
leaning,
you, Com.
Doesn't it also lean quite heavily into distinct gender roles? So it would make sense possibly for Taash as a character to want to lean away from it, and for us to encourage them to lean more into their Qunari and Qun background. Are we not potentially undermining the gender, what's the word, fluidity, the non-binary nature of their character?
I think you're right, but I don't know why you're right. Because I'm thinking in my head.
I think you're right as well.
I think it's the accent.
No, I think you're right. I feel like there's actually
I want to disagree, but
well, no, I almost feel like I remember that being a conversation you have with Iron Bull of all fucking people. Like,
yeah, because he could have been a breeder or something like that.
Oh gosh, that's grim.
Well, but they wanted to request him because of his.
I feel like that's what you wanted from him.
Yeah, because that was his exploits and things like that, like his notoriety and stuff. So people wanted that in their their culture. So yeah, but yeah, so that's why I said I think you're right, but I don't remember why or how. So they would be very emphatic of saying you are this type of gender or whatever. So it kind of makes sense that you might be right. I don't remember. So.
Just on a quick check, it's apparently actually they have distinct roles within Qun society for people of each gender. This is just a very quick and cursory Google, and it's really Iron Bull who then uniquely gives us the idea that might not always be the case.
Yeah, there you go. See,
the memory kicking in, baby.
Yeah. So
10 years old, that game.
Who did y'all romance, if you romanced anybody at all?
Nev, and I was really hoping we'd use that as prosthetic in the sex scene.
I remember asking you, and you were like, I hope we do something with that leg.
Can you imagine?
Speaking of that leg, how long did it take anybody to actually realize that?
So I asked them about this, and I think you're going to be disappointed as well, because I was the slow one on this.
I was also slow.
Cobb recognized it as soon as he realized it was a snake, and Legion knew it before the game even came out. So
I genuinely remember running around with Nev, and there was just this very awkward clanking noise, and I kept being like, what the fuck is this? Why is it specifically with Nev? And I thought maybe it was like her scepter clanking against her belt. Like, I thought, what a weird detail that they would hone in on so hard for the thing. And then it wasn't until, because I chose to help Treviso, so Minrathous got blown up by the dragon, and Nev comes back with a prosthetic, and I was like, what the fuck happened?
Now, that would have been a great detail story.
Yeah, see, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, dude. And I think as I've seen, Nev was the most popular romance, at least is what I believe I saw related to users. So I went for Nev.
I was initially going to go Balara, and then I met Taash, and I went, oh, I could get uppies.
Honestly, it looked appealing, right? We all want to get thrown around a little bit.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
So, I've done enough playthroughs that I've seen multiple romance arcs. But the one I immediately latched onto in the playthrough I had to abandon because of bugs was Harding.
That was the one that I left open early in the game. Essentially, that was the one that I led on and gave them my idea that they might have a chance.
Again?
But, yeah.
After doing that in Inquisition, I was like, we're not doing that again. We are not leading her on.
Again. I couldn't help myself. And really, Nev, I wanted to romance, but I found that Nev didn't make a good first impression. I mentioned it to you guys that I didn't like the vocal performance, the voice performance, sorry, the actor. I didn't think they were doing a great job at the very beginning. But it really actually grew on me the more the game went on. And it felt, which I assume was the intention, that there was almost this kind of classic film noir PI kind of tone to it all the time. And when I took that perspective on, I kind of grew a bit more fond of the voice, and I leaned more towards it. I don't know how anyone was with this, but I was surprised because they were probably my favorite companion. I was surprised. I think I saw Emmrich was right at the bottom of the list.
At the bottom.
But is this because, if you'll pardon the weird distinction, they're more of a father than they are a daddy? Is it that?
Yeah, I feel like immediately upon meeting Emmrich, I was like, this is not a romantic interest.
Yeah.
This is a great character. I love this character.
In the wheel choice, you got the heart.
I don't want to fuck this
I
character.
immediately skipped over that heart. I was like, nah, that homie's going right in the friend zone. I'm not interested in Emmrich that way. But Emmrich to me was like,
the issue was that I didn't think I could fix him because he wasn't broken enough.
Well, then we find out.
Yeah, but I think I said something like this to you, Banana, because like to me, Emmrich and Solus, I treated Emmrich the same way I treated Solus in my playthrough of Inquisition, because I played a male Inquisitor, and so I didn't have the romancing Solus was off the table from the get go, and so I really enjoyed these characters that are so in tuned with not only the physical world but that metaphysical world of the Fade, and because those two things they weave in with each other, it's really what makes up the world of Thedas, that they have such an understanding of the world around them that it makes me wanting to talk to them and ask them questions and get their insight, because to me they have that like sage's knowledge that, you know, if there was a human being on this planet that's been around since, you know, before, you know, in the BC era, I would love to fucking talk to them, because they have seen the world. They've really seen the world in a sense.
I think that is a big part of it. I think in both of those cases, in Solus and Emmrich, you're introduced to them as this font of knowledge. And when you meet people like that, it's almost difficult to imagine just relaxing and having a good time with them. Because like when I met Emmrich, I was like, oh, this is a person I am not going to tell a joke to. And I can't imagine being in a romantic relationship with somebody I can't connect with on a humorous level.
I think there's also, on the same note, the way that you grow in affection and attraction with people is when you grow with those people as well, which I imagine is where it's not always the case, obviously, but most people tend to line up with people of a very similar age at a similar stage in life at a similar point in their development, because you get to then go on those journeys together. Whereas you feel, even though it turns out really not quite to be the case, you feel as though Emmrich has sort of done that. They've already been to Switzerland and they've sold their guidebooks. They don't need to go anymore. Whereas you might want to. And then there's a whole party of people who actually do want to go to Switzerland. I think I'm referring to fucking when I say that, but I'm not sure. Legion, who did you romance?
I didn't romance. I normally on these RPG playthroughs, I just don't touch
Legion
that stuff.
doesn't believe in love.
Yeah.
Never has, never will.
Yeah. I tend to approach those after I've played the game a few times, because now I know the characters well enough that I'm like, okay, I'm going to deep dive that direction now. I don't tend to do that on the first playthrough, so I didn't. But if I were to...
Go on.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I said that, and I'm like, maybe the Lucanis one would have been neat.
Yeah.
I feel like that one would be pretty popular. I also think it's interesting that if not for Legion's point of view, every one of us would have missed out on something. Because in my choosing Harding, Sniff choosing Taash, Com choosing Nev, we have all picked a character who finds romance in the game if you don't romance them. So Nev and Lucanis end up together. and Taash and Harding end up together. I didn't know that until I talked to Legion, and then went on and played another playthrough where I didn't romance any of them, and got to see that that's how that kind of naturally plays out.
And they work.
I like it.
They're
yeah,
perfect.
Like, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if you bring those characters with you and they get to do their banter. You see it kind of develop through the game, so it feels right when it happens at the end of the game. I just kind of forgot that was an option. So like, I romanced Harding, I romanced Taash, and then in that third playthrough, they got together, and I was like, oh, right, that's a thing. Like, other people can have relationships that I'm not involved in.
The world doesn't revolve around me. Now I'm pissed.
They're really cute when they talk to.
Curious.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm very curious where Banana thinks we go when this call ends.
I have no sense of object permanence. Like, you guys exist on my computer and nowhere else.
And that goes for you too, audience.
Yes.
I wanted to ask a question that's probably actually slightly more serious, and it's on the same topic of romance, and I can throw out my perspective on it first. I have a problem with the romances in this game, which is also the problem that I had with the romances specifically in Dragon Age 2. I don't like that any potential created rook can romance any potential romance partner. I think that undervalues actual true human sexuality, where some people are homosexual, some are heterosexual, some are bisexual, some whatever the case may be, pansexual, demisexual, asexual, whatever it might be. These characters don't have sexual identities. They're essentially just a recipient in that sense. And I feel someone like Dorian, who has a more explicit sexual identity, even Cassandra, someone who has a more explicit sexual identity than, yup, anyone gets it. There's a lot more to that. And I think that actually devalues.
I would agree. I feel like this is kind of BioWare almost getting lazy to say that, like, we're not going to define these characters so that everybody can get that experience of having a romance with anyone they want in a single playthrough. But if you were to go back and you want to see the Dorian romance, you have to pick a male character, and it kind of defines you. And I like that in Inquisition. I like the idea that these are people, they behave as people will. Some people are explicitly one thing. Some people are much more flexible and they're open to everybody, but like, not everyone is open to everyone. Like, that is just not how it works.
I would piggyback off that, and I would just say that, like, it's again that, like, it's a casting in order to cast that wide net, and they don't want you to potentially miss out on something. So it's just let them have a romance with anyone that they want, regardless of their identity, and just that's it. Which, like, I think I agree. I think, like, from a real world standpoint, it, you know, people are way more complex than that. But I get it from a design perspective of just, like, I want people to just be able to have their choice, and so, like, regardless of, because if I try to, like, logically work this backwards, like, you create your character and you decide what your character is, and then you get introduced all of these characters, and you go like, wow, I would actually really like to explore this a potential romance with Lucanis, and then Lucanis is like, nah, brah, I'm gay, sorry about it, and you go, well, shit, I picked a female person. Like, I get both sides of that thing from, like, just a design, you know, just a designing standpoint. I personally would rather have that lock off, you know, things being hard locked. I personally would like that, but I see the other side of that.
I mean,
I also think it presents almost as short-sighted in, what if we see these characters again? There's not going to be that kind of, like, we had locks with Solas's romance and Inquisition. And then in Veilguard, you dig into the character of Solas, and it makes so much sense. Solas has a lot of trauma in his past And that's why he's not open to non-elves. And he has almost his ideal partner that he's known for an absurdly long time. That ideal partner is female. It makes sense that Solus would only be looking for female elven partners.
Right.
It feels like if you're really going to define a character and that character is going to come back, you want to give them that more realistic definition to say that they're not just a blank slate that I can project whatever I want onto. Sorry, I just gestured way too close to my camera. But they're not that they're not this empty vessel that you can kind of fill however you want. They're a fully fledged character when you meet them, and sometimes they're not going to be exactly what you hoped for. And then they can come back and you can really play with that character and why they are the way that they are in the future. And I don't think we're ever going to see that with the characters from Veilguard.
I don't think we're going to get much else from Thedas after Veilguard. I really don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's much to do at this point.
Not from a game standpoint, but maybe.
No,
literature.
I think I would hazard a guess like they would do a big reset and they would be like maybe the hard reset is
Dragon Age Andromeda.
They Dragon Age Andromeda, but it's Dragon Age the Qun to bring it all back home. To bring it all back home. But
thank the maker.
I had I had a thought though, because we were talking about Solus, specifically female elves. Do you have any kind of other special interactions with Solus when you have your fate meetings if you are a female elf? Does anybody know on that front?
The only thing you have is like if you're an elf, you get to see the fate in color. Whereas if you're not an elf, it's pretty like muted, black and whitish, sepia,
like grayish green. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember too many. My first playthrough was a female elf character.
Okay.
I don't remember too many options. I think there were a few options just for being an elf, not specifically female elf.
There wasn't like any kind of like Solus gives you gives you that upper eye flip, you know.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is that like I can't trust this person to even be an ally. Let's not go anywhere near a romantic interest. So like
who said anything about romance?
I like a bad boy.
My like fade fuck buddy, Solus.
Yeah.
Fade fuck buddy, let's go.
Literally the man of my dreams.
Right, so you won't move us on from the Qun, but you will move us on from Fade Fuck Buddy.
No. It's a conjunction.
I mean, to be fair, I covered it all. So
where else?
Discussion over.
I was going to say, someone
you're welcome.
Amazing. Real cool.
So no, what I was going to say is that not everybody can be articulate, charismatic, and handsome like Khan.
Correct.
Who can get whatever he wants at any time. So I would say that there is some reality to what you're saying but I think we've seen examples in the RPG world of where that works and where it doesn't work. So having everyone be like pansexual kind of works out in a situation where you just don't have enough companions to make a romance.
Some of those timings were exceptional.
Yeah. I think your dog might have the best comedic timing out of anyone here.
All three of them are going
pack it in, honestly.
Yeah.
We had a good run. We did well, guys.
Yeah.
I'll be tight to move on.
Comedy career comes to a screeching halt because I can't keep up with a Pomeranian.
Pomeranians. But no, like let's say Cyberpunk, for instance. Cyberpunk has amazing romances in it, but you only have 3. There's only 3 options for you. And depending on your character identification, you're locked out, And so that would have worked out to where if you did make because you have options there, at least 3 of them, and that's it. Whereas Veilguard, I think you're right at that perfect amount for 7 to be able to say Nev is going to exclusively like male characters like Lucanis. Taash and Harding will exclusively only like female characters. because that's there. We know their backstory. We know where that kind of canon lies if you don't select those things.
I feel like Harding works for pansexuality because of Inquisition. Because you could flirt with Harding.
You flirt with her.
Inquisitor.
You couldn't romance her.
You couldn't romance her, but you could flirt with her, and
Sure.
her response to that seemed receptive. It wasn't like, ew.
You're her superior.
So-
She's gonna like him. Yeah.
All right. See, now that ruins.
Well, now it's getting into very
The
difficult
Inquisition's
power
HR.
dynamics.
The Inquisitor was an HR nightmare.
Yeah. Well, no, but see, like all the other companions in Inquisition were like your council table and your equals and things like that. It's just you're just a herald of Andraste. That's not the same thing. But anyway, but you have like games like Baldur's Gate that like there's a limiting factor there, but you do have other companions to choose from. So their story is their story. So yes, you have a fleshed out character. So this one, I would say that they did latch on to the mindset of like, let's just open it up. Let's just let you be who you want to be and be who with you want to be in this game. Whereas I do think that you're right in this particular game, because the amount of companions you have, I don't think it would have hurt to have a companion or two to have a bias, because that's storytelling. That's a writer's choice.
Something we've already discussed with this game, where this game was already going to have issues with replayability. So to lock romances behind the character you've created, it feels like it's like, go replay our game with pacing issues and unskippable cutscenes and a lot of tedium that you appreciated the first time because you're learning a lot.
Yeah.
But on a second playthrough, you're going to be like, this sucks now. And now you want to experience a romance, which more or less culminates towards the end of the game. You have to play through the entire game to see these romances play out. And it's a game with pacing issues. Like,
It all just ends in disappointment, because BioWare just hates romance scenes. They just make them the most like strange looking things.
yeah, I gotta say, the Taash romance scene, so uncomfortable.
We talked about this. So I romanced Taash, and we get to that scene. The first time I played it twice, because I rolled back my towards the ending to go get some cleanup stuff, because I was so close to 100% all the like achievements. And so the first time I have it pops up Taash comes to you and is like, I'm ready, and I just leaned into it, and I flirted back, and it became the awkward sex on the couch thing that it was. And then, or I should say, with Taash, I got uppies, and then it went to the couch.
Yeah.
And then the second time around, though, I just went rogue, and I chose the like teary option for like something a little sad. And your character says something like really sad because of the death of I think at that point it was, for me, Davrin and Hassan. And I say something sad, and then all of a sudden this coin rolls and it taps you on the heel, because Taash is like disrobed themselves, and Taash just goes, whoops.
Yeah.
Completely misreading
it was
the scene.
so
It was so hysterical.
So, I only did that scene once, and I talked to Sniff about this, and like, I picked that empathetic option because we had just lost a companion. And I just remember that like abrupt tonal shift of like, yeah, well, I mean, all we have is the memories now. And you turn around and Taash is naked, and it's just like, not a great time, Taash.
Like,
But your character just goes, but this makes it better.
Yeah.
It's like wiping away a tear off your partner's cheek with your dick instead of a tissue.
Yeah, a little bit.
It is very,
That's
and
awful.
I've told Sniff this, it's reminiscent of that scene in Final Fantasy X, where Yuta has come to the realization that her entire fucking life is a lie, and she needs to kind of rebuild from the shattered pieces of what she thought was her life. And that's when Thedas takes the opportunity to kiss her. And it's just like, dude, no! She is openly sobbing. There is nothing romantic about this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've already established Bioware doesn't always get it right. Just like, Jack was supposed to be pansexual, but because of all the hoopla that was going on at the time of Mass Effect 2 before it came out, because Mass Effect 1 was derided as a space sex adventure game, so Mass Effect
bought it.
I wanted to bone the blue chick. That was what it was.
Everyone's getting it.
Leisure Suit Larry in space.
Yeah. So it did tone it down, but in the wrong places. Like we should have been able to romance Zaid. Why not? Right? We should have been able to make Jack pansexual, but she wasn't. So it was things like that. And because that was supposed to be in it, but they made her deliberately choose Melshep. All right. So what about Emmrich? Did y'all choose to let him become a lich, or did y'all just resurrect Manfred?
Oh yeah, I let him be a lich. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like the culmination of his journey. Manfred. I also felt like it honored the sacrifice of Manfred more to let Emmrich then go on to live what they had always wanted to do, and it's the thing that they couldn't do without their role in this story. So it felt like the natural progression. So for myself, I went for lich.
Yeah. I completely agree with what Com said. The idea that that's who Emmrich was always supposed to be. And in that moment, Manfred sacrifices himself, and it feels like Manfred is giving you the okay to be the person you're supposed to be. It felt wrong to be like, nah, fuck that. Let's bring Manfred back.
It's funny, you bring Manfred back, and Manfred just starts hissing at him way more. And it's just like very mad at him.
It's like it's the Kate Sith death versus the Aerith death. The one of them has the gravitas and weight from the fact that it's actually a real sacrifice, and the other one means nothing. Well, it doesn't mean nothing, but they're brought back.
It means
pretty much means nothing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Also, I'm really glad that you managed to bring Final Fantasy VII into this.
We did it.
I tried with 10, but couldn't quite get all the way to 7.
So when you say that he was always meant to be a lich, like you're part of the Qun saying that's what you were meant to do, so do that. That's
no, it felt like that was the decision he had made, regardless of any outside input.
That was his life.
Very Ravani.
His life's work is leading into that.
Yeah.
It is, in fact, the exact opposite of what you just said.
So, of course, naturally, I chose no resurrect Manfred. So
I did want Manfred back, but
yeah. And Emmrich doesn't.
With a heavy heart.
Yeah, and Emmrich says no. This is a much far better choice. I mean, of course, he's going to say that, right? And but as you kind of play the game, he kind of like,
welcome back, Manfred. I gave up everything for you.
Now pour me some tea.
What an asshole!
Yeah, Manfred actually goes on to become kind of a cast. He learns the craft for himself, so he grows and learns more too. So
and then he sacrifices Emmrich to become a lich.
Yeah, that would be great. I would definitely
become the real boy.
Yeah.
Is this how you get the secret ending?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
This is that Liza P crossover.
What about Ilario with Lucanis? Did y'all jail him or forgive him?
I think I jailed him.
What game are we talking about?
I chose forgive.
I don't even remember the choice that was presented to me. I think I just kind of let Lucanis do his own thing, and it felt like he made the choice, and I was just watching, which I assume meant he forgave him.
Yeah.
Well, 22% forgave him. The other 78% said jail. And I thought maybe that was kind of a...
I'm surprised it's that heavy in one direction.
Well, I mean, Ilario, betrayed you or betrayed Lucanis. Like it's a family thing, and almost twice it nearly got their grandmother killed. So
yeah,
I also feel like that was like the most obvious betrayal imaginable. Like from the moment you are presented with Ilario and Lucanis, you're like, oh yeah,
you Ilario's walk bad in guy. And you ask Ilario, you're like, and who are you? And he goes, I'm her grandson. And that was it. Like, she was like, I'm the first Talon. I'm the fourth Talon. I'm the fifth Talon. I'm her grandson.
I think the moment Lucanis says I was her favorite, I was like, yep, Ilario hates you.
I think the other thing for me as well is it's always the problem that any piece of literature has, is that essentially in terms of real depth and interest, you're introduced to 3 characters, one of which is Lucanis, who definitely ain't the bad guy, one of which is the grandmother, who's the victim, and then there's the other guy. Who could Freya possibly be? It could be anyone of him.
Yeah.
It suffer from that a little bit.
So I know they deliberately chose don't do capital punishment, but I do think that if they said, okay, jail time or we execute him, that would have been a stronger, a percentage thing here. Because it would have been interesting to see those answers too.
That also feels more consistent with the crows.
That's what I thought too. I was like, both of these choices end with him being alive, but if the crows if anything that's been preached since Origins is that the even crows finish their fucking contract, and the contract ain't up until that bitch is dead.
Yeah. That was, going back and replaying Origins, like, Zevran feels like he is in fear for his life from the crows because he failed to kill you. And then you get to that moment in Veilguard, it's just like, yeah, we made all that shit up. Nobody's in danger.
It's just a bluff.
We now follow the Qun.
Yeah.
Well, we've definitely been covering a lot of Dragon Age the Veilguard, and if the content is something that you did enjoy, then hopefully you'll give it a like and subscribe. If there's any comments you feel free engaging with us about, please put it in the comments. We also have a Discord. Follow us there. If there's any other topics that you wish for us to discuss, feel free to give us those comments in either the Discord or in any video that we have. Thank you for watching, and on to the rest of the show.
Getting back to the Qun discussion.
Before we played Veilguard, I had theories that I was telling Banana about when it came to the dwarves. And it turns out
I wasn't listening, but he did tell me about them.
Yeah, and I don't know if Banana wrote or remembers any of it, but it was like I
wrote it down. He's optimistic. Yeah.
I don't want to give a percentage, but I was like almost 100% with what I thought.
I would say like Legion called most of Harding's story ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's just from lore. Yeah, I was like, I see a path here, and if that's the way they go, then it makes sense. But when she actually had to, the emotion that she had to choose, it was either calm, I think, or let me look at it again. Yeah, calm or anger. Very different point of views as far as how the Titans want, because in lore, the ancient dwarves were basically kind of almost like extensions of the Titans. They were basically their feelers, their tendrils. They're people, but that's kind of what they did. They communicated in that method. They were just extensions of the Titans. So Harding is a callback to that. And so because the Titans were wronged in such a way, you can either have Harding embrace the calm side of that or anger. Which one did y'all choose?
Anger.
I chose calm.
84% calm.
I feel like most of Harding's story up until that point is her struggling to maintain control. So in that moment, it feels like you're almost kind of encouraging everything she's done up to that point to say like, no, you can control this. You can decide how this goes. Anger felt very justified, but it felt destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I leaned into I felt it was justified, and it was that, obviously, for me, there's only 2 emotions in life. There's anger and erections. So it felt that it would be a shame to cut half of human experience out, or dwarf experience for that matter, or more sincerely.
You're gonna blow your mind. I don't think Harding's ever experienced an erection.
You need to learn your biology, boy. What I would really say is that I felt that essentially what we were doing by not recognizing the Titan's anger, and that's what I was leaning towards, was it's more recognizing, honoring, not encouraging. It was to say that there was this great injustice. There was this great struggle. There was this violence. There was this destruction. It's okay to feel this, and to lean in the other direction felt as though it was essentially negating that and saying this is not okay. And it almost felt as though it's the idea in real life of sort of pushing down an emotion of just, no, we'll just bury that next to the trauma. We'll put that down there. This won't come back later. No way. It felt as though it was almost creating a path for a worse future in attempting to not deal with that reality now, which I don't think is how the game meant it, but it's how I took it.
I was going to say the way I was interpreting it was more of like on such a macro scale. Like the way it felt like it was being portrayed to me was like, if Harding really leans into the anger, there's a potential for the next cataclysmic thing. Like, for now, Harding can use it to channel and help us stop Solus and Elgarnon and Gillenane. But, like, what if down the road, like, Harding just succumbs to that rage and that anger, and then all of a sudden we have, I don't know, the blight bursts, finds a way to burst through the veil, refuels the Titans, and the Titans wake back up, and next thing we know, we're like in a whole other kind of thing. Which, hey, BioWare, I'll take a job. I'll take a writing job. We'll do this. We'll Dragon Age Titanfall. Here
I
we
would just
go.
love to
Let's
see
go.
in the credits of writing, it's just the gamer's advocate, and like Sniff is now a permanent member, and it's just the four of us just brainstorming.
Well, there's actually a lot of fan fiction / lore that.
Oh, I bet that's the best.
Yeah, Cobb learning that there's non-sexual fan fiction.
Well, I mean, this might be tied a little bit to what Cobb might like, but Leliana has a very mysterious origin. And
Speaking of things Cobb likes.
Hey, that's the name of the game. Carry on.
But basically, she's in Origins, she's in 2, and she's in 3. Inquisition. But she can be killed in Origins. You can kill her. And then she shows up in 2. And then there's an addressing of that fact in 2. And so there's a few things that are really mysterious about her, and they do involve her possibly being a Lyrium ghost. And a Lyrium ghost would be directly tied to the Titans. And so if the Titans were to somehow reemerge or whatever, they could actually be our worst fear, because now Leliana, especially if you make her like the Chantry.
Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now she has inside knowledge about every single part of Southern Fereldas and Southern Thedas. And then, so she has like influence far beyond her capacity. If you look at some of her like memories, she remembers her mom vaguely, and a lot of it's kind of like she's not really in a physical state. It's almost like she's had memories implanted into her. And then when in Inquisition, if you had romanced her in Origins, she suddenly, if she's not over the Chantry, she can suddenly just leave, and they see a bunch of like crows in the tower leaving, and she's suddenly just gone. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of mystery with Leliana, and my whole thing was been like, what about the Titans? We were introduced with the Shabatal and a bunch of other stuff, and I was like just captivated at the fact that this city that we closed off at Orzammar, suddenly we're going to. I was there. I was like, I couldn't believe it. So when we had this whole thing with like the anger or the calmness of Harding, I was like, that's not my focus. And the fact that we're even talking about dwarves and Titans and all, that was my focus. And so I really couldn't even remember what I chose. Because that wasn't really important to me. I was really more captivated by the lore because I wanted that to be true. I wanted to actually see a spirit of Leliana come forth and say, okay, we're going to choose this path, because she was the moving force to tie in the Titans' awakening to be able to represent themselves through Harding. That to me would have worked, but it didn't.
I did want to tie back to something that Com said regarding that choice, where it felt like an appreciation of what the Titans had gone through to let Harding embrace that anger. And I feel like the reason I didn't see that in that choice was because up until that point, playing as an elven character, you're given specific dialogue options with Harding to to basically discuss the suffering of the Titans prior to that final choice. To say that, like, listen, I'm not an elven god. I wasn't directly involved. My gods did this to your people, and I'm sorry for that. I don't believe it's something that should have happened. I understand that there's a great deal of suffering that stems from that decision, and I might be a reminder of that suffering to you just by being an elf. So I feel like when I finally got to that decision, I had already had that conversation with Harding to say that, like, I recognize that this happened. We're not brushing it under the rug. We're not pretending it didn't happen. But I feel like there is a productive way to handle it moving forward. So for me, it felt like a much more reasonable option because I had already established, like, we're not pretending it didn't happen.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the most important question for me when it came to the companions, what did y'all do with the Griffons? Did y'all send them to Arlathan, or did you send them to the Grey Wardens?
Arlathan Forest.
I put them with the Grey Wardens.
I sent them to Arlathan.
Interesting. 67% sent them to Arlathan, but I'm confused by that answer because you guys have clearly played the previous games before, but I do wonder how many new players who maybe haven't played Origins, you know, and are fully acquainted with the Wardens would have chosen that. Because to me, Dragon Age, no matter what game we're talking about, to me, should be Warden centric. They're not, but they should be. But
I think that was one of the decisions, like the companion decisions, that genuinely felt like it could have gone either way for me. Like most of the other ones felt like the right answer given the investment I had in role playing as the character I had been through up until that moment. But in that decision, I was like, this feels like a coin toss. Like I could see this going either way.
My literal thought process in choosing to send them to the Grey Wardens was purely to not screw with the ecosystem in Arlathan.
That's
that was
fair.
it.
Yeah.
I was like, because the Griffons have been known.
There will be no truffles.
Well, there would be no truffle, but I mean, like,
and by extension,
that could damage the like
no more
the
nugs.
Hala. They could have started hunting the Hala because, you know, the implication is that they get sent to Arlathan to be kind of like relatively sanctuaried by this guy. But like, ideally, I would think that the way of just talking to that one character very briefly, his whole thing would be like, I want them to flourish here in Arlathan, but, you know, what happens to all the other things that can't protect themselves from a fucking like
of course
evil lion?
we don't know how they would, you know, integrate themselves with Hala in a bigger picture, but the one tidbit that we have, the Griffin chose not to eat the Hala.
Yeah,
that was
chose to help the injured Hala.
But
Asan's already been going through Grey Warden training through the two characters prior. So like Asan already kind of has that background. That's not to say that the other 12 brothers and sisters and then their subsequent generations after that would take on that same mentality.
That's a Mythal problem.
That's fair.
So
that's a Mythal problem.
I will say that was I think one of the reasons that it felt okay to go in either direction, because obviously, like, I'm okay with them being in Arlathan Forest. That's the one I chose. But I'm absolutely okay with them being the Grey Wardens, is because we've talked about like the corruption of the Grey Wardens over the course of events from Origins to Veilguard. It felt like with the sequence of events that happened in Veilguard, you saw that fall and you saw what it cost the Grey Wardens, that it felt like there was going to be documentation. It felt like there was going to be a memory of when the Grey Wardens fell, and it wasn't going to happen again. So you're going to see the Grey Wardens organization be what it was always meant to be as a result of shitty leadership getting destroyed. And I'm okay with them having the Griffons in their employ because it feels like they're going to handle it correctly. So that was I think ultimately why that decision was a coin flip, is because I didn't really see a negative outcome for either opportunity.
Sure.
I mean, there is obviously a possibility in both directions, but it felt so very unlikely that either of those would really have a negative outcome.
It made me laugh because I made the choice to send them to the Grey Wardens, and I can't, the female Grey Warden, she's like, that I guess essentially becomes the next Lord Commander. She's like, we'll make sure that fate never happens to them again. And I'm like, that's a big promise to be keeping, because you can't like,
you're going to be dead.
Yeah, you're going to be long dead before that problem ever arises again.
Banana knows my stance on the whole Star Wars, that I'm not anti-Jedi, but I'm definitely not pro-Jedi, because some of the best stories and are based on the fact that the hubris of the Jedi causes their downfall every single time.
Just want to highlight the similarities between the Path of the Jedi and the Qun right now.
The hubris is the difference there. It's not,
is it?
Well,
is it the difference?
Yeah, I mean, because they're not like installing themselves as the government in those places, and the police of those places. So they're just fighting against the Tevinter. That's all they're doing, is fighting against the Tevinter at this point. Because even when they were in Ferode and with Iron Bull, they could have taken over. He says there are far larger forces behind me, but that's not their interest. So
that's not much of a defense. I didn't get to do my justification for Alathan.
No. I'm circling back around. Okay.
Doesn't feel like it.
Star Wars Griffons.
Yeah. So I think, like, for me, like, that's why I sent them to Arlathan, because we've already had the hubris of the Grey Wardens, and this is coming from a person who loves the Grey Wardens and thinks Dragon Age is the Grey Wardens. But I think that the Grey Wardens have had their moment, and they've shown through their hubris that they weren't able to handle that responsibility. So again, I agree with Banana 100%. I could see both sides of that. But anyway, tell me your opinion.
2 points.
Did you make a decision on this, Com?
I did. So 2 points. The first one is very simple and straightforward. It's that they were ended by the Wardens once, and I don't think the Wardens have earned the credit to have another go at that. I can't think of anything more in the sense of sort of through your blood, through your soul, through your ancestry, of a more vile idea than the very ones who wiped you out, bringing you back and putting you into war again. That felt so gross. Can't
imagine a more tragic ending to that story than the Wardens fucking up again. And
that's it. Like, I don't think this generation is going to end up bad, but I don't know what it's going to be in 5 generations and 8 generations.
Like I said, how could she make a promise like that?
Is it Efka and Antoine? Like, they seem great.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to whoever comes later. And the second one was a bit more romantic, I guess. How many are there? 15? 20?
13.
It's a non-viable population. They're not going to survive. Unless we say, it's a magical creature. There's some kind of special rules that take place for them. There's not.
I don't know what the telomere situation is with Griffons. I'm gonna guess they're basically alligators.
Let me get my Punnett square out. Excuse me a second.
I kind of went the other way. In my mind, it was just that's non-viable. They're not going anywhere. I would rather their last generation or last 2 generations, whatever it might be, just has that sort of comfortable end to life as the stewards of that forest. Rather than have the last one be shot down in war or let down by the Grey Wardens, wherever it happened to be. The practicality of it was the part that I found hard to let go of, which was the idea that if you let them go, you've just lost the Griffons. And the Grey Wardens have been getting by without the Griffons for a while, but that's not to say that having 13, you said?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
13 full-grown Griffons in a generation wouldn't
depending on whether or not Davrin dies.
Isn't there a part in Veilguard that said that Davrin mentioned a book where 2 Griffons alone were able to take down a dragon? So it wouldn't take much.
The Griffin Bible. Yeah.
The Griffin Bible. And I'm just saying is that I don't think you say 13's not enough for. You're probably right as far as survivability go, but
Yeah.
we do know that their eggs can continue on for a long time because I mean that's what happened with these. This clutch, there was a missing clutch that just was unhatched for.
Yeah, I
knows
also
how
think
long.
it's presented in this story that like Davern says like there are 13 Griffons left in Thedas and 12 of them just got kidnapped, and you're like, yeah, but nobody knew about those 13 until now, so maybe there's actually more.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
that's
we
true. There
also-
could be other ones. And I always just felt like the implication, like whichever choice that you make, it feels like the game is kind of implying that like they're going to multiply. Like the idea is to get the population back up.
Math
How that
doesn't
happens.
exist in Thedas.
I was going to
Don't worry
say
about it.
how that
Ain't
I
no
don't know what the genetic diversity is of siblings.
Yeah.
Hell, they could just be calling them brothers and sisters, but they have no actual genetic like crossing.
Right,
I
yeah.
don't fucking know.
They're a combination of 4 species already. I think they're diverse.
Yeah.
I'd like you to know that, by the way, since you said that, I've been desperately trying to think of some kind of Thedas-based math pun, and I've got nothing. The closest I got was arithadic, and I just realized that sounds fucking
Yeah, they
grim.
discover a whole new world called PEMDAS, and you're like,
Oh, that'd be so
I get
much
it.
better.
The Pythagoras theorem.
Yeah.
Oh, why am I so shit at this?
Go work out a Ren
Brilliant.
fair for 2 years and
Yeah.
work on your pun game, and then we'll talk.
So when Dragon Age 5 comes out and Parvalin gathers their masses with Taash, and Taash says, you know what, you're right, Ferelden and Orlais and all them, they gotta go.
No,
we
she's
don't have
Ravani.
we don't have any Griffins anymore. So those
We got by
Griff-
without him before.
So
I don't know what you're talking about. Tosh would never do that. They're Ravani.
right, she didn't lead them, so they decided to do that. So
They didn't. Come on.
yeah, that's what I
Push
said.
trying to get down to 20. Yeah. Also, not that bad a scene. It's
Yeah.
clearly implied that this is just a thing they do. Like, have you never been around like a sports team before?
Yeah.
My gym. If you're late to fucking kickboxing, it's the same shit.
I actually really appreciated that scene for that exact reason. It was
I liked it.
it showed people making an effort. It showed that it was going to be something that took time. It wasn't
And it
going to be an
wasn't-
instantaneous thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't blown out of proportion when the mistake was
gonna
made.
say, and it wasn't Tosh being like exploding on the leader. It was literally the leader went, "Oh, I fucked up.
Yeah.
This is how I feel like I want to rectify this." And it wasn't like she just went. It's not like their leader went, "I now gotta like, do 20 push-ups or
Yeah.
else I split my wrist." Or
And it
something.
wasn't like her giving herself 20 lashes. It was
Yeah.
20 push-ups.
Right. And it had a light-hearted tone to it. It was we recognized the gravity of the situation, but also the levity within it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Isabel is great. She could do it. I don't care what she did. It would have been
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
I didn't know who that was. I had to Google him.
They've been in every game.
Have they?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They look different, but yeah. On
they
Dragon
look
Age,
I had to
very
go
different
back.
at Origins.
I didn't realize, Tom, I'm with you. I didn't realize that character had been there since the beginning, and I had to go back for that.
By the way, to add on to that, my defense to Banana saying that in every game was to go, I haven't played 2.
It's funny because they are a companion in 2. So like that's the big one where they're introduced.
That's why then.
Yeah.
Quick, Legion, move on. I've saved myself, kind of.
But they exist in Origins. They're just very minor and they look nothing like the character model from later games.
Isabel is
Gotcha.
possibly a little bit older than they actually. I'm glad that they didn't make her look super young though, because she had been a ship captain for like 20 years, I believe, in Dragon Age 2. So unless you've been a ship captain at age 10, she's no less than 30.
A real
So-
Tetris situation.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, there's some for all you Wind Waker fans out there.
There's one over there.
We already lost all of the 3D Zelda fans with my previous
Yeah.
rants on this channel. So sorry,
Bring 'em back,
you're
Sniff.
out of luck.
Bring him
Sniff.
back.
Don't worry, I'll pull him back in. I got it. I'll get him.
The redemption arc, baby.
Yeah.
so which city did y'all save? Treviso or Minrathous?
I felt that I misunderstood the
Treviso.
assignment there. I went and saved.
I let them both burn.
Yeah, I went and played with Hassan.
Yeah.
I save Treviso because I thought that it was more likely that Minrathous could stand up to a threat for longer if there was a chance of getting them both.
Yeah.
That was it. Also, it's nicer.
I was gonna say the whole point. My whole thought was like, the Teventer may make a move for the throne, but we could easily rip out the Teventer, like, or the whatever. Yeah, I guess that's what are they
Venatori.
called? Venatori. That's their word. Venatori is somebody I thought was not easy enough to take care of. Over.
Yeah, that weirdly did feel like the weakest faction antagonist in the game, the Venatori.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up saving Minrathous just because my first playthrough, my character was a shadow dragon.
Right.
It felt lore appropriate to save Minrathous. Going back and playing through on my second character, who was a necromancer, whatever that faction was.
The Mournwatch.
Mournwatch, yeah. I think I saved Treviso. I think it's presented a lot more strongly that Treviso is in a more precarious situation when you're going through and they're telling you like this is what the blight could do to Treviso. It feels more dire, so I feel like it makes a little more sense to go protect Treviso. Also, knowing it was a dragon and the crows are primarily assassins, they don't do straight up fights.
Yeah,
right.
Felt like it made more sense as well.
Also, the fact that the Teventer have a floating castle that shot lasers, like, why would a dragon be that big of a threat to them?
that was exactly what I was coming from. It wasn't even directly that, but it was the magic in their society was the way they're presented, the way they feel is that they feel more than capable of defending themselves. And I knew, of course, they wouldn't because that's the storyline. But I thought the implication in terms of storytelling was that in that moment, Treviso was more in danger, was more liable to collapse. So of course you'd go there first because they're the ones who had the biggest burden to deal with. Whereas Minrathous felt like they could possibly defend themselves to some degree. So yeah,
also,
Treviso.
just looking at the costs, like, do you want to go and save what is essentially Venice, or do you want to save the slave trade capital of the world?
Right.
Like,
it's just so much nicer, isn't it? Just when you go there, it feels great.
Nobody will willingly save Amsterdam.
I do like the verticality of the game. I know this is a different subject, but I do like how there's so many levels in those cities that kind of makes it feel much, because in Dragon Age 2, obviously, and even Inquisition, it's really just making the city longer so you can go this way, or like you go through a cutscene and then a save point or whatever. This one, it actually lets you just go through the whole city.
Well, why don't we use that actually as sort of like a stepping stone and have a look at some of those gameplay elements? Because we've talked a lot about lore, about the world building decisions. What about the gameplay? Because in the end, it's a video game, and I agree with you that the verticality I thought was fantastic. The general level design, which I think I mentioned already in this episode, was really good. I tried to listen. It's hard going. I tried to listen to a few reviews of this game in the last week or two just to see what people were saying. I have occasionally heard people make complaints that I agree with. I've heard them make criticisms I disagree with. I heard someone say that the level design of verticality is one of the worst games they've ever played, and that was one of the only things where I thought, "What the fuck are you on about?" Really, that seemed to me a how can I say this? Breathtakingly stupid take. To say you don't like it, fine, because I don't always appreciate when my games have traversal elements. But to say that it was badly implemented, badly thought out, badly designed seemed to me absolutely incredibly ill thought out.
Yeah.
On a purely technical level.
I thought everything like visually looked great as far as like how the different levels looked.
Yeah.
I liked the way of going about it. Like we talked back at the beginning about that, like that stickiness of, walking across a balance beam. They didn't make a stupid mini game where you have to like try to make sure you balance or you fall in the water or whatever.
Especially with the consequence of falling in this game being just do it again.
Yeah.
That would have been infuriating.
Yeah, and I think Minrathous was one of my least favorite places, but I personally don't like large city biomes in games. Like every time I think back on like going to Novigrad in Witcher 3, having to traverse that fucking city, I would rather go take clumps out of the cat box right now. Like that's what I would do. One of the places that I visually liked and I enjoyed exploring, but coming back to it, I was like, kill me, was the place where you find Taash, the like beach area. It was really cool to explore initially, but then when you came back to do certain side quests and having to run back and forth through it, I was like, kill me. I don't really care for that.
And the amount of time that half of that map was locked off was infuriating.
Yeah.
Which is why I said play the game kind of like it's intended. It'll be a lot less frustrating.
No, because for sure. The crossroads and the fade, I really liked what they were doing there. I liked a lot. They played a lot with the verticality. They gave that place feeling like a nether realm, essentially. I loved the touch of the guide spirit taking you from ferrying you from place to place like a boat of Karen. I
do wish they'd given us more reason to go back to that area.
Yeah.
In the end, I did find myself switching to the map for fast travel, which is great that we had that option. And I don't want you to force me to go through those mirrors. I want you to give me a reason to want to go back, do something there, and then use the mirrors.
Yeah.
The first few trips that I took through the mirrors, I did go through the fade, and I was enjoying getting in the boat and all that. But by the time I had to make my 50th trip to Minrathous, never. Open map, poof, go. Yeah. It'd be nice if there was a bit more to do.
Well, in that specific area, I use that mainly because of the merchants, because you can sell your stuff in one location there rather than go to all the different cities and stuff. So, yeah, I like that.
It took me so long to realize that there was merchants there. Like it was maybe halfway through the game at some point, and I went back in there to do. It was like when you get those guardian orbs or whatever to get through the three doors, and and there was one door specifically in that little circle to get through, and I saw the icon for a merchant. I went, "There's a merchant here."
And I'll be honest with you, I did like it was a callback to Origins. There's a lot of little things in this game that are callback to Origins that you, unless you play the game, you wouldn't know. But like the Revenants, I mean, they were hard. They were super difficult. But guess what? In Origins, if you face them, they were a bear.
It was interesting that you brought up that verticality, because when I'm thinking like my favorite areas in the game, all of the ones I appreciated most had those vertical elements. I wasn't a huge fan of Arlethan overall because a lot of it felt too spread out. Same with the Ravani coast. Navarra, to a certain extent, got a little boring. It was just, I have to walk forever.
Yeah.
I still like Navarra. I feel like it fit very well with like the actual world building they were doing in that area, to say that like it's a relatively compact space. You're navigating essentially a necropolis, so everything has its position. But like,
is that Navarra, the one where Emmrich's from?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
But like Minrathous and Treviso always felt fun. Every time I was going through, it just felt enjoyable.
Treviso is just done so well. So well.
Beautiful. It's probably the best version of that environment that I think I've ever seen in the game. Better than Assassin's Creed's, and better than Final Fantasy 15's essentially Venetian city. I thought it was absolutely outstanding. And I would probably generally agree with Banana that my favorites were actually Minrathous and Treviso. And my least favorites didn't incorporate the verticality. I didn't dislike them, but my least favorites were definitely the place where the Grey Wardens were, the Necropolis, and the Ravani coast.
Weisshaupt was amazing.
Weisshaupt was really cool. Yeah,
this is something that I think deserves actually a bit of a talk at some point, is when the game is very good. and it's very good in those big set piece moments. I thought they really managed to hit the nail on the head. Do we want to go into them and have a talk about those?
Well, that's a great point, because that's why when I gave the score like an 8, and I would say almost 8.5, because like you said, when it's good, it's like 9.5 good. When it's bad, it's like, it's above mid, it's 6.5, but that's where I'm at with that 8, because that just lines up with that. So.
It was for me, like, if I could say that same thing, if I said most of the game was a 6 and the high points were a 9 or even a 10, it just spent so long at that 6. There was so few and far between. So it's one of those things where I forget which one it is. Is it the mode is really high, but the mean of the game is very, very mid? I forget mode and median and which one they are.
Mode would be the most common point.
Is it? Yeah, then the mode for me would be sort of 5 or a 6, and that was a real letdown. But that's when the game is at its best. And that, oddly enough, is where I would make the comparison with, Mass Effect Andromeda. I don't think Andromeda is a great game, but I thought it had those moments, and there was particularly character-based side quests and the final mission when they're at their tight storytelling best. I think that's what BioWare is still very good at. They're still very good at giving you payoffs in those moments to the groundwork that they've laid before, and giving you that half an hour or 1 hour segment of a game, which is fucking incredible. And the ones I can think of that stand out for me was Weisshaupt, the entire last few hours, which I was really not looking forward to. I think Banana, you told me
that push to Elgernon and Gillinane right there at the end. Yeah.
I wrote in our group chat about the game that I've only got the last bit to go, point of no return. How long is it? Banana said 3 or 4 hours, and I had that moment of, really, for fuck's sake, I'm done. It was probably the best 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And some of the high points of Emmerich's solo missions, companion missions, and Davrin's as well. I really, really loved those bits, but they were outstanding.
I really enjoyed Weisshaupt. I really enjoyed the solo areas for Emmerich's story and Davrin's story. I didn't like that you couldn't go back to those places.
Yeah.
Weisshaupt made a lot of sense that you couldn't go back there. I'm not disagreeing with that. I again, coming at this from the completionist standpoint, I was terrified I was going to miss something in Weisshaupt. So when I was playing through that section, it felt like I wasn't getting the appropriate experience, because it's like, we need to get to the fortress or whatever the hell we're trying to do. And I'm like, yeah, but what if I miss loot?
I'm going to miss a treasure box.
Yeah.
I cannot miss the treasure box.
Let's go find my daddy. Shut up.
Yeah. Shut up, little girl. I have to find a new mask that I'm never going to wear.
There was that chalice from Origins throwback, and I was like,
yeah, I loved seeing that.
If I just ran through here, I wouldn't have seen that. So
there's a lovely little tasty bit of fan service as well. Just that right kind, where you feel when you find that's made for you because of how quiet it is in that moment. That was beautiful.
When you have the choice, when you're a Grey Warden, to send the mayor to become a Grey Warden, if it's an option, and so we see him again at the Siege of Weisshaupt. It's a wonderful throwback, and that really reminded me. Like, a lot of people like, this is not like Origins. That was kind of like Origins. You gave him a choice: death or become a warden. It's one to one.
You see him again if you let him live and not as a warden. You see him again when you
if you free him,
sneak into that Venatori ritual that Elgernon is leading.
Really?
And it's basically like, we shouldn't have given him a second chance. He's a piece of shit.
Well, I mean, like, you kill him, because I don't think I've ever forgiven him. So.
Oh yeah, I feel like there are times where it's lore appropriate to forgive him. There are so many more times where I'm like, no.
Yeah, see, I sent him to the Wardens, and I loved that little scene that you had where you found him on the battlefield. So not at Weisshaupt, but when you found him in the Grey Warden map. It was beautiful.
You know how I would have written that whole thing where the commander comes back, and of course we all complained about it. How he comes back, and you know what's going to happen to him, but you know this.
Oh yeah.
What if the mayor took the fall?
That dude has never read a book before in his life.
What if the mayor, that was his way of doing it? Because that would have kind of almost like, okay, you came full circle. You came full circle though, because a warden's got to die based on the situation. So you're ready to do it. Davrin's ready to do it. Then the commander steps in. But what if it was the mayor? The mayor steps in and says, you know what, I'm going to do it. And then the commander's still in the background saying, just being a jerk, you know?
See, no, because then I'm missing that moment for the commander that I think I.
I was going to say, who punched the commander? Who chose to punch him?
No, I was cool.
No?
I did on my second playthrough. The first time I let him do his thing. The second time I was like, what happens if I punch you in the face?
Of course, I did all options, but I mean, I kept following the path of like, you can't be mean in this game. You can't be mean in this game. And they kept referring to the warden commander as like, see, I wanted to be mean to this guy. I punched him.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty mean.
Well, that's something I think we could also get into is that idea of how mean, how evil you can be. And I think there is some point to this, but nowhere near as much as people do describe it as being. I see this game as having a lot more in common with Mass Effect than I do with the earlier Dragon Age games.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels a lot as though you're playing as essentially a Commander Shepard type character in this. You can't play as evil Shepard. Essentially, there's two modes. There's good cock, bad cock. Like, that's it. Yeah, it's Renegade and Paragon. It's goody and baddie. You're not good and evil.
You don't side with the Reapers. That would be evil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't just gun down
your
your teammates for no
You're
reason.
always a hero. You just might be a dick about it.
Yeah,
that's it.
The like
it's not
being a bad guy thing as being the hero it's boring. It's not. It becomes narratively boring. It's been proven time and again. Like the most famous example is the blowing up Megaton in Fallout 3. Like people live to go do that, but then that's it. That's like the worst that you can do in Fallout 3. And then if you do bad things throughout the wasteland, like you just get an annoying sound in the karma system. That's all you get, and then that's it. It's boring. It's not fun. It's not engaging.
There are games that have done the idea that you can lean down that more evil path. Like you said, there's
Baldur's
that.
Gate 3.
Knights of the Old Republic. You can do this. It's almost always the least interesting. Not always, but I almost always find it to be the least interesting. I find it diverts actual development of the game time. I would rather you spent your fucking time just giving me this good story arc, because my character's probably going to be a hero anyway. Spend your time developing that. Don't give me this pointless branching path that I'm not going to need. And it's fully within the fucking BioWare modern tradition to develop your game like this. This is not an out-of-nowhere thing. You can't, can you? You can't side with Corypheus and Inquisition.
Right.
You can execute people. Yes, you can, but you're sitting in judgment on these individuals as they come before you haven't committed various crimes. You can't chop Dorian's head off, can you? I don't know.
No.
This is...
When you go into the Fade in that alternate reality, there's some really interesting things, but that is that alternate future, not the you know.
I also think like BioWare's history has shown us that almost the whole point of their games is those moments where you as the hero fall short and have to deal with the emotional weight of your failure. And if you're a piece of shit throughout the entire game, that's not a thing. So like in those moments where, you know, you couldn't save everybody at Weisshaupt, you feel like you let them down. But if you're like, I wanted to kill them all to begin with, then that moment has no significance. So making you out to be the hero, making you out to be the type of person who cares about everybody, who doesn't want to let a single person down, makes for a better narrative because you care. But like, if your whole goal is to be an ass, why care about anything?
That's also where the fucking tragedy of the Morden death comes from.
Yeah.
It's not in the fucking hated that guy. I can't wait to get rid of him. First chance I get pop. It's very much not that. It's that weighing up in that moment the odds of the greater good idea, which again fits you into that Paragon and Renegade category, not the good twat category. It's just not what BioWare have ever offered, so I don't know why people were expecting this to be a thing. unless it's just a half-baked or so late it's almost fucking posthumous attempt at justifying a dislike for the game upon.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. Because every single time I've heard it, it's like, I wanted to become a renegade. They won't let me be. That's the wrong series. And even then, it's not. It's a morality system that does not exist in Dragon Age. They've said this since Origins. There is no morality system. There's just choices.
Yeah. People just approve or disapprove. It's not like, and that's it.
Honestly, I would have liked, that would have been cool to have a bit more if I could push back against teammates more often. Yeah, that would actually be great. I'm not going to argue that we're better off for not having more choices, although I did lose in that sense of the two branching pathways for good and evil. But no, I'd like to have a game maybe where I was good, but I had 6 dialogue options instead of 3 with every character, and some of them I could actually be a bit of a jack-off, because honestly, some of my best moments in the game for the in-party banter was... I think it was Davrin and Lucanis, who at one point did a bit at each other's throats after the first encounter with Gillenheim. And I had that moment of, that's really cool. They're arguing. If I could have provoked that a little bit more often to hear their tempers get more heated and more agitated throughout the game, that would have been wonderful.
But can you imagine, like, if they did that with Thane and Jacob, and they had actually... See,
that's the name you should have forgotten.
Yeah. If they had actually, like, pitted them, because Jacob doesn't like them to begin with.
Yeah.
Right?
You get a very brief sense of that, and then it's all...
Right. You don't like mercenaries, what? Or assassins, because what? That's what you are. You're a hired hand. But I guess my point is that if they had that in the story, guess how much more interesting Jacob becomes. I mean, it doesn't take much to make Jacob
interesting. He goes from a 0 to a non-zero, which is
1.
great.
Right, but it would have created something there to kind of make you want to hear the banter between them and have them in your party. Now there's strife.
I also think just artistically, it gives the voice actors the opportunity to demonstrate range with their characters.
Yeah.
Which this is one of those things that, like, it feels like I'm nitpicking. But if you go back to Baldur's Gate 3, everybody loves Astarion. Astarion gets to experience, like, the full gamut of human experience in the brief experience you have with him. Not every character gets that opportunity because it doesn't suit their character. They might not be in situations where they're supposed to be enraged. But if you give your characters the opportunity to experience those extreme emotions, you're giving your performers the opportunity to give you a solid performance, because those extremes are when an actor really gets the opportunity to shine.
I think we could really then, especially with the Baldur's Gate 3 comparison, and you could also bring in other games that are like this. You could say Pillars of Eternity for one, you could say Wasteland 2. There's a lot of games where these choices and this way of playing actually does exist. Probably no more than Baldur's Gate 3, which really has its full darkened path that you could take through the entire game. If your problem with, and it's a perfectly viable problem to have, there's nothing wrong with someone playing this game and thinking, I wish I could go down a dark path. I'm not going to play it. I don't like it. But your problem isn't with Dragon Age Veilguard. Your problem is with BioWare. You essentially don't like modern BioWare games. And by modern, I mean it's going back as far as the last 15 years or so, because BioWare haven't done that for a very, very long time. And if you're expecting them to, you're on hiding for nothing, and you're probably better off going and playing Baldur's Gate 3 or games similar to that and looking more into that modern tradition in gaming rather than BioWare, because they've moved on. They do different things now.
All those complaints about an RPG not letting you do this. Well, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a Game of the Year nominee, and it doesn't do any of those things either. So
those all feel like vague distractions from the reasons people are actually complaining.
Sure. But that's why I said Com was right. His assessment's right.
Whilst at the same time recognizing that there are plenty of things to dislike.
Yeah.
If this isn't the game you're looking for, absolutely. The ones I found hard to really hard to stomach were things like the level design being bad. That to me was nonsensical. There are plenty of things to dislike in this game if you are looking for a classic choice-led, almost D&D lineage RPG. In fact, this game is so much is there for you to dislike that you just have to realize this game wasn't made for you. As much of a shame as that is. On the bright side, there's a lot of games that are made for you. So go play them.
Yeah.
I think our discussions with Legion about these issues with the game and the way people respond to them pointed out something to me that, like, if somebody can't give you specifics, they hate the game for a reason they are embarrassed to share.
Yeah.
They hate the game for a reason that they know doesn't justify their hatred.
Or on the other to kind of piggyback, because you had, like, you were saying, like, you have nitpicks, and I love when people have nitpicks, because to me that says you really liked something, and the only thing that you can take away negatively is a nitpick. Like, if they had just done maybe if they had tweaked a certain way, this like, I would have enjoyed this that little extra bit more. And what I find is like the conversation is to when people do complain, what they point out are just overall nitpicks, and they say that they didn't like the game, and I'm like, no, it sounds like you had to have enjoyed the game, because for you to nitpick the way that you're nitpicking, like, if you hated this game, you would have stopped like forever ago. You would have so much more than just a nitpick.
Yeah,
like there's so
I think there's
more.
a certain argument for some of the reviews, because that's why you'll never see a review from me, because I'm going to give you facts. And if you can't keep up with a critical review, because that's all I'm going to do is give you facts. It's not my job to give you a rating, right? That's a different issue. But a review is different, fundamentally different.
What did you give it out of 10, by the way?
I gave it an 8. That's a rating. It's not a review.
Oh, okay. It's a semantic argument.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah, it's semantic because it's true.
Well, I also think this is very much a discussion of the game, so a review could be kind of pieced together from our discussion, but Legion is not saying, I'm going to put together a review for you. I'm not going to boil my experience down to a brief summary and then provide that to you as if it's meaningful to you.
Oh yeah, no one could describe this as fucking brief.
Yeah. But the ones that I have seen that say, and these are not just video reviews, but actually, written reviews, but say, I played this for 10 hours or something, and I had to stop because of at this mission, but I'm like, okay, so you have to tell me why you played even those first 10 hours. Were you just struggling through it this whole time? Was there, because there could have just been one moment where you said, this game doesn't speak to me at all, so I have to shut it down. 10 hours is a lot, believe it or not, if you're not counting the character creator. Yeah. Which some people could be in there.
Played this game for 10 hours, 9 hours of it were in the character creator.
Right. So you have to be very specific about. So, because I will say that there is some merit in the whole 10-hour timeline, because to me, the writing at the first 10 hours, to me, is intentionally weak. Now, it could be seen as it's just weak, and it is. But I think it's intentionally weak. You're not supposed to have, they're not trying to spell out everything to you. It's really meant a game that's meant to be for people who have kind of somewhat familiar with the Dragon Age universe. But there are going to be those that have never played it before. So you're going to have some kind of layering here. The very first scene you have with Varric, who's telling you about our situation now and why we're at Minrathous. He could go on to say what Minrathous is. He could even say what part of Thedas we're in, or how far away we are from Ferelden. But there's none of that. It's very clean cut, so it's somewhat abbreviated. So on one hand, you have all this lore that's towing the story up to this point, but on the other side, they're not like inundating you with a lot of information that you probably already know to begin with. So it's kind of a good thing. I think it's intentionally minimal for writing, and that comes off as bad writing. But I think the writing really picks up right about the 15 to 20 hour mark, because there's some marks there that I'm like, wow. They went at it very intelligently. So
the beginning, like, I remember when first starting the game and getting through that, like, beginning part of Minrathous, like getting to Solus, stopping the ritual, all of that. Like, basically, it wasn't until I think it was like just shy of between choosing to save Treviso or honestly, it was kind of like once I got into the ossuary, I think is about where the writing for me really was kind of like clicking and picking up for me. And so, like, relatively, like, even less than 10 hours into the game, like, because you can get to the ossuary like that. I recall being like, I do. I remember just being like, okay, if this is the kind of quippy shit we're about to have to deal with this whole time, I'm gonna not be happy. And it wasn't. Like it still kind of existed, but they started off with it, and then they pulled that away pretty quick.
Well, the quipification, if you will, that's present throughout the game, I think it's really just a result of a few very natural things. One is I do tend to believe that anotherification coming, that marvelification of dialogue is quite pervasive just in the modern media landscape in mainstream games.
J.J. Abrams, you asshole.
But honestly, I think it's a natural side effect if you're going to have a party and a party banter system, you're gonna have a lot of light shit in there because I don't want them fucking lore dumping me mid-mission. I don't know what they can really do except quip with each other, except play with each other. And there can be moments where that pours you out or maybe takes away from the gravity of what's taking place. And yeah, that's bad. That's bad. But we need to find the moments in the game, those instances where this doesn't make sense to do, but not throw out the baby with the bathwater, if you will. I wanted to add, by the way, just onto the first 10 hours or so. And initially I was giving you a very raised eyebrow because I think we were going down a different path. When I heard you say the writing is intentionally bad, for the first 10 hours, I thought you just meant the quality of the writing, in which case I was just thinking that's the stupidest fucking decision anyone could ever make in their life. Yeah, no, we've purposely made the first 10 hours fucking shit. Like, that would be nonsensical. But I think we ended up actually approaching more, it was the narrative, it's the story, it's the structure, more than that. I hate, and this is a real hate, this is a point of detestation for me. I watched a couple of reviews that did the same thing. It was, and I've talked about this privately with you guys. I watched a few reviewers who said that they played the first 3 hours, 5 hours, they hate the game, they're not going to carry on, this is their score, etc. You don't get to fucking give a score if you didn't finish the game if you're a fucking reviewer. Yeah. That is your fucking job. If you're getting paid for it, which these people are, there's parts of your job that you like, there's parts of your job that you don't fucking like. You finish that fucking game and then you give me your opinion when you're done. And if your opinion is still, I hate it, that's fine. That's fine, but it's your job to go out there and actually be, for the sake of the dignity of your fucking audience, for your sake of being honest with your audience, for being upfront with them, play the whole fucking game. You're even going to do like the 10 playthroughs thing, but play the whole damn thing through from start to finish, unless there's a reason that you can't. And I'm talking game-breaking bugs. Game-breaking bugs. Like, I'm not expecting anyone to play that. Oh, I've forgotten the name now, but it's essentially the Twin Peaks knockoff that was out on PC. You haven't got to play that.
Alan Wake?
No. That was actually quite good. I'll remember the name at some point in the next few minutes, and I'll jump up with it. This game is not broken. This game doesn't run badly. I ran this on a terrible laptop with nice scaling options. I got the game running at a steady 30 to 40 FPS all the way through, except for a few set pieces. Those were rough. You have a duty as a reviewer to play this damn game. You have a duty as a reviewer to not say, I played 3 hours, I hated it, and threw my fucking toys out of the pram. That is absolutely gross.
That's
especially if you're profiting from that.
Yeah. I just imagine looking at like reviews for restaurants in my neighborhood, going to like a sushi restaurant, and somebody gave it 1 star and said I took a big bite of wasabi and that was it, and then I left. Like, you're not reviewing anything even remotely close to what I care about. You should not be participating in this review discussion. You're an idiot.
I had very raw fish.
Yeah.
And to be clear, even though this isn't a review, it's about as close as we can get to one without calling it a review. It's why I finished the fucking game. Honestly, towards the end, I didn't really want to. And if it was on my own, I probably wouldn't have bothered. I would have played the 40 hours and not the 55 or whatever it took to finish it. But it was just out of the respect that people are going to listen to this. The least you can do is show that you did the minimum of work.
Yeah.
Which in my mind is actually seeing the whole damn thing from start to finish. Like, the game was Deadly Premonition, by the way. That's
poor
the one
you. You got to play a video game. Poor you. Like,
yeah, there are definitely video games that I've played where I was like, this feels like a job and I hate it now. But it wasn't my job. Right. There were games that I was like, oh, this is getting a bit tedious. I don't want to keep doing this. I'll take breaks. But like, I don't think I've ever quit on a game and then told anybody else what they should think about the game.
It's not even that for me. It's the monetizing part of it. After that, Like, because I have watched shit movies and I've got half an hour in and thought, fuck this. And then I told a friend, don't bother. That's dire.
So
I haven't written a review to go in a magazine. I haven't got on YouTube and set up a video and expected this. No way.
Yeah, I've seen those same reviews, and then they say, yeah, the worst game of all time, 4 out of 10. I've played bad games that were unplayable. I couldn't finish them because they were so buggy. And I would say that's probably less than a 4, and they were probably the worst of all time. But that's my point. Is like, how is it a worst of all time? That was the worst game that you've ever played as a reviewer. A 4 out of 10. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't think we understand the concept of rating.
That leads me to never think about your reviews ever again.
Yeah.
This is a person who has such a small breadth of knowledge that the worst game they've ever played is a 4 out of 10. They've probably played 3 games. I don't care what their opinion is moving forward.
They're just remembering Newgrounds. That's all they.
Yeah.
I gotta, and it kind of like, I think it kind of lends into the thing. Cause this is a question I like to ask myself all the time. And I brought it up earlier. Now I give the caveat of, I had a very good friend give me a code for this game. So I paid 0 money for this experience. And I feel like that might be likewise with some of you guys as well.
Yeah.
But if you were to try to at least put yourself in the shoes of somebody who took this off the shelf or bought it off of Steam or wherever you got it, and you paid the full $70, 70 quid, 70 euro dollar, whatever it is, the numerical number of 70 money, would you say that you're happy that you had 70 money on this game, or does that hamper anything as far as your view on this game? Like for me, I would say I wouldn't be disappointed that I spent 70 money. But I would have said that I would have really waited for a sale,
I don't have a very good position because I have a YouTube channel that allows me to, anything I do game wise can be, deducted. So it's one of those, but when I look at inflation, when I look at inflation and games themselves, it's really hard for me to answer that question from removing that aspect, because games,
I find that a lot of reviewers, they have that ability, right? Like they have the extra, basically, that because it's part of their job, the money that they make from their platform is able to help fund this hobby of gaming. But I find that a lot of places, even though I really enjoy people's reviewers, like I'll name drop like Jake Baldino, for example. He does a lot of stuff with Game Ranks, but he does his own side stuff too. He usually is the one that does the Before You Buy series with Game Ranks, and I really like listening to Jake because I think he still keeps a pretty good like sense of the like average gamer outside of somebody within the gaming news sphere.
But it's very difficult with the world of inflation to really chastise games that are $70, because when Baldur's Gate 1 came out, I think it was $38, $39.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about a game that's 25, 30 years later, that's $70. I mean, it's 100% increase, but comparatively, look at everything else from that time period, from 1999. This has got to be the least inflated form of entertainment that we have. When I went to movies in 1999, I mean, my ticket was maybe $3 to $4, maybe $5. $3 for a matinee, $5 for an evening. Now it's $15. So we're talking about,
often as well, they won't have that matinee and evening distinction anymore.
Yeah. So we're looking at 300% increase. And that's just one example. So you take like movies that you buy now, they're a little bit cheaper only because you can stream that stuff. But taking the box, if you had to like pay for that, I'm pretty sure they're like $30 now. Whereas a DVD you could buy in the store 10 years ago would be $15, maybe $20.
Yeah.
So I guess my point here is that I have to take it. In fact, when you ask a question like that, I always say, yes, that's a fair point, but the inflation also hits people. So it's not that the entertainment industry is being unfair to games, because I think games have been far more equal to people than any other form of entertainment. I also just know that people are watching their budget more too. And I think that's the best way to approach that question.
Yeah.
There's also the reality, though, with video games in particular. So the ones I can always remember is when I got in 1997 Final Fantasy VII. I remember it had the £49.99 sticker on there. And then a few years later, I had to buy it again because I'd worn the disc out, or more likely I'd scratched it. And it was in the PlayStation Platinum range, which was the standard price for all the classic games that were now a year or two old, and that was £20 at the time. Now, today, I think Rebirth, when it came out, was 60, 70. So you're looking anywhere between a 20 to 40% increase on the whole thing, which, like you say, is generally over that time period. That is well below the expected inflation rate. However, there is always the caveat that a video game is a non-reusable, in the sense of when you're done with it, you're kind of done with it for most people. It's a non-reusable, purely luxury entertainment item. And it's quite a high price already to pay for that. If that had seen the standard increases in inflation that we'd be seeing for most things across the board, and video gaming now was costing, what, £150? £180 per game, it would have died a death like on its own arse. It would have just impacted upon itself like a dying star. It couldn't generally, I think, be hit by the same inflationary rates as almost everything else by the nature of what kind of product it is and how high those prices started. So I do feel it exists in quite a unique position. Mm-hmm. But to answer the more direct question of would this game have been worth it if I'd have paid the price for it, so I didn't pay for it. I think, yeah, I wouldn't have felt bad paying full price for it. But anyone now, I would recommend wait for a sale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say, like, as you were kind of building up to this, Sniff, I had kind of a system in my head for how I would approach this question. And if you imagine that you purchase Veilguard at $70 and you get a 10 out of 10 experience, you'd say it was worth $70. That's not what I got from Veilguard. I said Veilguard was a 7 out of 10 experience. And so if somebody would ask me to put a price on the experience that I paid, I would say $50 is a decent price for the experience I got from this game. So if you take my 7 out of 10 score and scale it to 70, it ends up at 49. So in my head, the score I'm giving this game is almost the price that I would pay to have that experience, knowing the quality that I would get. Mm-hmm. So if somebody were to ask me, like, oh, Veilguard is on sale, it's $50, do you think it's worth it? I'd say yes. That's kind of where I am with this game. Like, you pay the full price to get the first experience, the untainted experience before other people's reviews really get to weigh in on your experience. And that's a risk you kind of have to take. And if you're in a business like game reviewing, you eat it. You just deal with it. That's the cost of doing business. But if you're looking for an evaluation of whether or not you should get a game, I think asking people who have had the full experience, how much would you pay for this game, is almost the most appropriate score you can give a game.
Yeah.
It's when did it become worth it? At what price threshold would you say this is a game you should get? And for me, it happened to work out that my scoring and the price threshold fit almost exactly.
And I would agree with that price threshold as well. Like and I know that can go into a whole other set of weeds of, like, you know, is there really such a game that exists that, like, $70, $70, $80, hell, even this really shitty practice that I'm not a fan of this early access thing, like paying almost double, so like $130 for a chance to play the game like a week early or 3 days early, or
that's
whatever.
a Kickstarter. That's different. That's not early access.
Well, that's not even a Kickstarter. I mean,
Well, no, there are
Call of
definitely
Duty's
some
doing that. People just now with Indiana Jones, that technically comes out tomorrow, but people have paid.
You're talking about
over
early. Oh, I'm
$100
sorry.
just-
I'm sorry. There's
like,
early access.
Not
and
even
there's
early access,
Yeah.
like early
like
release.
early
Or-
release.
Early
That's what it
release,
is. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Their
Sorry.
verbiage of
Sorry.
how they like
Yeah.
to sell it,
Okay.
how these companies are selling it, they're selling it as early access.
Okay.
But I agree with you,
Yeah.
Legion. Early access would imply like Baldur's Gate 3 years ago, you were able to pick it up for $30 and it was a work in progress. That I agree with. But this like they should be calling it early release, but the buzzword, the selling word that the companies are using is early access.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just add sort of one thing onto the banana scale as well,
Banana scale.
which is at
Wow.
some point.
Yes, let's
I was
call it
thinking that
banana
for a while.
scale.
That's our new thing. It's a banana scale.
Banana per scale.
What's our banana scale?
You do have to then factor in as well, which is why I would say I wouldn't be disappointed with paying full price for it, but I would say wait for a sale, despite a sale of around $50 or so, despite only thinking it's a 6 out of 10 game on the whole, is I think time in a game does matter as well.
Mhm.
Am I getting 50 hours? Because what I got out of this game was 57 hours.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking at mine right now. I'm at 80.
Legion's just agreeing with you, Com. It's okay.
What?
You looked very unprepared for Legion to agree with you.
I have no idea what people are looking at. I'm just going to barge on. So, a game that's a 6 out of 10 experience, but of which I get a 57-hour experience of a 6 out of 10 game where I'm not having a bad time at any time all the way through it, that could be worth a $60 or $70 investment. On the other hand, there are games which are only 4 or 5 hours long. That might be an exaggeration. For those, I wouldn't pay this price. But a game that's 10 or 12 hours, maybe up to 15, if that's a 9 out of 10 game or a 10 out of 10 game, that could be worth this as well. It's just finding that sweet spot between how enjoyable is this game, how concentrated in that enjoyment is that enjoyment, how long is the game, which is, yeah, again, why for me, worth it full price, yes. Would I recommend someone now to buy it full price, especially now that we're a few weeks in and maybe sales are coming up? Now I would definitely say wait for a sale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I was saying that there are some people that directly associate worth of a game with how much time you spend in it.
Mm.
That's 100% correct, because regardless if you have a good time or not, there's like, yeah, I spent 50 hours in that game. I mean, I didn't really enjoy it, but I did spend 50 hours in it, and I only paid $15 for it, so it was kind of worth it. That's where they put that line.
I would never, ever associate the number of hours I've put into a game with the price I should have paid for it, because I would not pay a fucking cent for any Destiny 2 game, and I have thousands of hours in that.
Well, I have 150 hours in this game. I checked yesterday. I have 150 hours. And but I think that is fairly relevant. I mean, because it is good. It is to add to what Sniff was asking, is it worth it? And it's such a loaded question because there's so many factors in play here. You have inflation. You have, did you enjoy it? And then,
Suck
like
it, nerd. I have 164.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to.
I've got exactly.
Those are rookie numbers. I gotta put mine up.
82.
Yeah, but like for instance, Baldur's Gate 3 in early access, I had over 1,000 hours. So I already had. If you want to put it like in that perspective, and the game wasn't even out yet. So, but yeah, I mean, I was only saying, Com, you're making a great point, because I totally missed that some people will actually
because
value.
we totally weren't expecting you to make a great point.
Yeah, wow, that was surprisingly coherent.
You didn't slur once during that.
You didn't call anyone a 2868.
Well, it's just that some people will actually directly value their games based on the hours that you'll put into it, and that makes sense to a point, I think. But I think it's just part of the bigger picture. The music. I need to talk about the music. I don't like it at all. There are moments. Memorable. There are moments that I like it, but by and large, I would say 80 to 85% of the music I can't stand. And I've never felt that way about a game.
Really? I guess it wasn't. I didn't pay that much attention to it, or like it never did. Like, it didn't affect me one way or the other. It was just there as the background dressing. Like, it didn't really affect me one way or the other. So I don't have much of an opinion on music to Veilguard.
I think that kind of ties back into what we said during our music episode, where like if the music for a game is forgettable, it's probably shit music.
I think from my perspective, I really liked moments of the music, and I remember at one point sending you guys a message saying, "Wow, this music is sick." And oddly enough, it was during the Weisshaupt mission.
Yeah.
In that moment when the music
In the
was
moments where the game was great.
yeah, when the game was great, it was fucking great. However, on the whole, forgettable, uninspiring, forgotten sometimes actively that there was actually even music playing, and then I'd hear a note and think, "Oh shit, there's music."
I would
And-
assume that it's also just like, if it's not even just that, it's something that's been done already. Like it's music that has been done in other RPG games similar to Veilguard. Hell, it could have even been used in Inquisition or in previous games, and it's just more of like there's nothing new invented, and that's why it's something that like I don't even recognize. It doesn't phase me one way or the other because like it's just already existed before.
Well, they got Hans Zimmer. He was the one who did it.
Oh, who gives a shit?
Right. That's what I'm saying. But like I said, I mean, I was kind of expecting a little bit more than. But then I remembered a lot of Hans Zimmer's stuff. It's very ambient style music. It's like not really a theme, you know.
There are some, like I think of
Gladiator.
Inception, I believe, was him. Gladiator. Man of Steel, I think was him, and that's beautiful. There's even some amazing transitions in that. Where it's
The Holiday, The Dark Knight.
Yeah, like there is some great fucking shit there. On the whole, I'm not a fan of film scores in my video games, and I don't know if he actually composed the soundtrack. I know he co-composed, but I don't know if he was just the main theme or something like that. I think that video game composing and film composing are two very different and distinct categories of music, and there are people who can do both, definitely, but on the whole, I don't want my film composers in my video game world. I don't want the other way around either. The last thing was when Sniff was saying that you could have had this music in Inquisition or Origins. I go one tiny step further, and it's a critique. You could have had this music in Mass Effect. There are points when some of the music in the mission sounded like almost galaxy map music, and it just didn't feel like the right tone, because there was that almost sci-fi edge to the damn thing that I didn't get whatsoever.
And I don't want to ruin anybody's experience, but even like the menu when you open the game, it's.
I've never really looked at Hans Zimmer's like film work, and it's just like banger after banger film.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you've ever just seen a top, The Lion King, Muppet Treasure Island, The Prince of Egypt, Hannibal, El Dorado, Gladiator, Spirit, Matchstick Men, Madagascar, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, The Simpsons movie. What the? Anyway.
Did he do Man of Steel?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm saying is that like even the beginning when you open the game, the menu screen, it's just like over the top. It's like I don't need that. I just like give me a subtle like whatever because I'm starting it.
I was thinking kind of along those same lines. The menu music from Inquisition, I remember really enjoying. I don't remember that about Veilguard. I don't remember much of the music about Veilguard. And I think it's just that, like it's flat. It never had a big impact on the game itself, except in those moments where the game was exceptional, like in Weisshaupt. But
I'm not like asking you to do it, but could anyone sing a melody from this? No.
Yeah, the opening title, the don dun dun dun, and then they do take some stuff from Inquisition. The main theme from Inquisition, you hear it in parts, like in Arlethan Forest, you'll hear it in little bits and pieces.
I'm going to be honest though, like the little bit that Legion just did, you could convince me that's from any game ever.
Dun, 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 and then it like builds up and builds up. Yeah. I can hear it. Yeah.
I'm listening right now. Dragon Age, the Veilguard main theme, and I'm listening to it right now, and I'm just like,
I've never heard this before.
Yeah. I was like, oh, we're about the Justice League is about to take off. Like
I think like places like in Treviso, like if they just had like because you have those little musicians playing on one little guitar playing like the Sarah's theme. So if you had like a little guitar strum just every once in a while telling you that you're in this quiet city, I mean, I'd
love to see. And it was something a friend of mine was working on with a game that he was designing a long time ago. And it might actually not be a good idea, but it was more of a traditional sort of JRPG. So when you think of towns and cities have real themes, music, with a lead melody as opposed to ambient sound, as opposed to strings. And what he would have is the game would be playing the melody, and then there'd be musicians in the town. And every time you walked past a musician, the main melody would transition into a version being played by them. And then as you'd walk away from them, it would transition back into the main version, things like that. And it would just be a way to incorporate people within the city playing their music with the places having these distinct and recognizable themes. And a theme does so much. I'm playing Final Fantasy VI right now, and just having those themes in towns and cities makes them feel so cool, and it sticks in your head and gives them a personality. And I don't understand why you wouldn't use that weapon. You have an extra weapon to add character, and you've just decided, no, I don't need that bit.
Yeah, and that's
I
what
don't need that.
I love. Like in Baldur's Gate 3, there's so much music and ambient stuff that's on the cities and the taverns, but where you don't hear it is in the Elf Song Tavern, because there's a lore reason. And I love the little attention to details because you notice it when it's not there. Like, there's no music here.
But that's it, and you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
We have none of that with Veilguard. Sadly, none of that.
We have the exact opposite, where you could tell me that there's no music throughout all of Veilguard. They'd be like, okay, yeah. I'm
very tempted to go back and check if I'd turned it off in the menus.
Yeah.
But the Siege of Weisshaupt was amazing in so many ways. And that music, I remember it too. It was very...
But that's what I've mentioned before, which is not to use the word again, but it's the Marvelization, but of music. If you go and watch the Marvel movies, the music really works in the scenes. It doesn't work to listen to. If you just go and you listen to those soundtracks on their own, they're the most dull, boring things you'll ever hear in your life. But in the moment, when they're swelling as the characters are moving around, when they're hitting a harsh note as someone does a strike, something like that, and it reacts to the on-screen moment, it's brilliant. And that's what a lot of this soundtrack does. When there's nothing going on, there's nothing in the soundtrack. And then it just punctuates those visible beats, which is great in those moments. It's not so great in the other 50 hours when there's no music. Of note.
The other side of it, can you remember Origins theme music? Because I can.
But I haven't played it in 12 years.
Yeah, I know. It's Banana's been playing it recently, so that's kind of an unfair question. But I mean, that music in Origins is so distinct.
Can I remember that the main menu didn't have music? And it's a very sort of bloody battlefield. Or it's really just the ruins of something.
And you just hit the start and it goes boom like a drum. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
I think, isn't the main menu the aftermath of Ostagar?
Yeah.
Oh, I think the only recent of games that I can just remember the music for. There's something like Oblivion and Skyrim.
So distinct. Yeah.
They're very distinct, and I recall that. Now, most games now, kind of as I'm thinking about it and asking this question of how did I like the music? Honestly, I'm pretty as somebody who's a huge music person, just personally, most of the time in most video games recently, I don't particularly pay attention to the music. I guess because I'm too involved, I'm too enwrapped in the conversations going on or just the overall gameplay. So I find that if the music is doing its job of just helping being a background, then I guess for me the music passes. It doesn't matter whether they could have been playing, they could have had somebody being really offbeat in the trumpet section, and I would, as long as it was not noticeable enough to pull me out of the immersion, then it's whatever in my book.
But it was something we talked about before, going back to the music episode, was, in my experience, the best video game music, or the music that I feel most attached to, comes from a generally simpler age of video gaming, and I think music had more work to do. If you think of a Final Fantasy classic, not even 7, 8, and 9, but going back earlier than that.
Those cartridge ones.
Yeah, you've got these chip sort of set characters walking around on this flat background map where no one's really moving around. Nothing's hand-drawn and beautiful. It's very simple pixel-based art. And now we've got this very distinct music, normally based on 3 or 4 instruments, where every instrument's doing something very, very noticeable. And they're playing real melodies. Now we've got big 3D worlds full of detail that we don't want to distract you too much from, and fucking orchestras. Orchestras, which means we can use feel. We can use just percussive string playing, where they're not playing a melody, but they're just giving us nice da-da, da-da-da, 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 that kind of feeling all the way through, and it just feels so much richer than it would have if you go way back to playing it on those chipsets. And now, honestly, with a few very rare exceptions, if I listen to JRPG-style music, and it's done on an orchestra, it sounds fucking weird. Like, it just doesn't sound good. It feels really off. So I think what you're seeing there is just the natural evolution, in my opinion, for the worse, because I do really enjoy those very melody-led music soundtracks of games. It's just a natural progression of the increased complexity in video gaming.
I think there's an element of it that is tied to the gameplay itself. So if you think of like the games that you and I really appreciate in Final Fantasy, a lot of the gameplay elements were a bit repetitive. There's some tedium to grinding out those fights. And when you have that tedium, you have that repetition, and you don't have a solid soundtrack, it gets even more defeating. That idea, like, oh, I really don't want to do this because, like, it's just everything about it is unpleasant. But like, you can go back to Final Fantasy games that I've beaten before that were repetitive, and I go back to them and I engage in that repetition again, because the music is carrying a lot of that weight to say that, like, yeah, what I'm doing is repetitive, but like there's a fun soundtrack to it. I like that. And even in the like the overworld themes that play in 7 as you're navigating the world, you're just running across a swamp of green. Like, it's nothing tremendously exciting is going on, and you have the overworld theme playing. It makes it more pleasant. In this game, there wasn't a ton of opportunity for that. A stronger battle theme would have been awesome, but I enjoyed it without it. Didn't feel like I was engaged in the tedium of this game, so it didn't need that incredible soundtrack to carry some of the weight. Navigating through each of the areas never really felt long, tedious, so I didn't need a strong overworld theme or a strong Minrathous or Treviso theme. I could get by without it. So I think it worked in this game, but again, I'd much rather have an outstanding soundtrack.
Yeah.
The like trying to make video games more like a film, and I don't, and I find that is so, like, there's a reason they are two separate mediums. It's why, like, every time somebody brings up, my favorite one is every time somebody brings up wanting to make like a BioShock film, I kind of roll my eyes because I'm like, it works to me. The BioShock works in its medium as a video game over trying to make. You could find a way to stylize it in a film, but it won't have the same kind of impact, nor would I think it would make that kind of interest.
All you're going to have with a film of BioShock is a film that's based in the BioShock world. The joy of the story and the way it unfolds is in your self-discovery and the time that you spend with those characters. There's nothing in there where I would think, yep, make a 2-hour film of that. The only thing I can think of where you could is the one that they did, which is The Last of Us, because it's basically a fucking film anyway.
Yeah. Advent Children sucks. Nobody wanted that movie. Well, people wanted that movie.
Yeah, it was
Nobody
fun,
wanted what they got.
Stellar Blade, the movie. Okay, sure. I'll go.
Thedas, please, the movie.
So
again, that could probably work, but it just wouldn't be about the game. Sorry.
No, like I said, I think we need to close because I know you guys got to go. I didn't mean to keep you all this long.
You guys with your fucking
how dare
lives.
you, exclusively you.
None
of us kept on
So about
talking.
the Qun.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes. Let me one last thing about the Qun, real quick, if you don't mind.
you whore. Stop it.
Like I said, this is not the time or place to go over lore because trust me, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole with me.
Yeah. Our first 3-hour episode didn't do enough of a job on that.
I think it's our job as a channel, and I'm really proud of you guys. I think you guys are one of the most well thought out and articulate, and you really give the works that we talk about the credit that they're due. Whether it's a crap game or a good game, you at least have an analysis of it that's not colored by rose-colored glasses or something. So I really appreciate about that with you guys. And I think we owe it to any audience that sees or listens to our podcast to know that we're not coming at it from a rage bait standpoint, you know? So I think giving it this long of a session at least says that we wanted to cover it objectively as camp. We will have opinions, but they're not opinions based on emotion. You know, we did technically try to see the merits of everything and also the disadvantages where they, you know, failed. So I appreciate it about you guys. So with that, our permanent staff members here, BananaHammockRepublic, AMKomnenos, and possibly Sniff. Because less
the audition was playing.
Job application.
Yeah, less Legion, more Sniff. Say it in the comments if you think that's appropriate. But yeah, I appreciate everybody being here.
Just want to be clear, less Legion, not an option. More Sniff, an option. We're not getting rid of Legion now.
Look, I really appreciate you guys inviting me on. This has been really fun. I love talking about video games, even if I don't know them that well. Like I never played Dragon Age 2.
Whole brand.
I never played Dragon Age 2, but I'm able to hold that conversation because I've at least I've delved into the lore of Dragon Age 2. I probably won't ever get to play it, and that's okay. But like I understand a lot of it, you know.
Dragon Age 2 has a lot of things that it missed, but that's because it had such a short window to develop. But I will say this, as a person who loves BioWare, loves Mass Effect, loves Dragon Age, loves Isabella, Hawk in Dragon Age 2 is like my shepherd. To me, that is the face of Dragon Age.
Yeah.
So
it truly Dragon Age 2, the fault of it was the time that it came out for me in my life. It was, I think, like I was in the middle of college or like had just started college. It was somewhere in that like ballpark. And so there's many games in that time frame that they got missed then, and it's unfortunate because I probably won't get around to them.
It's still a playable game. It is fun. It's just the where you see the faults.
Is rough, but I'd say Dragon Age 2, I could go back and play that.
There's a lot of scenes, unfortunately, that are repetitive. The story is not. So if you're there for the story, you will have fun. But if you're there and just hoping to see something like, oh man, I was just here. What? How come these guys weren't here before? You know, I was just here. Yeah, it's not like that.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't really have like a negative opinion on it. Just more of like, I know myself and what I dedicate to with other games coming up. It just, I wouldn't get around to it eventually. It'd be great. If I win the lottery, then we'll talk, but
yeah, we fucking will.
Yeah. And I still wouldn't call our,
you won't ever see me again.
Yeah.
Specifically, I won't. The others, every day.
Hopefully we'll circle around to some of our previous topics again, because they're worth talking about. Like we've mentioned the music stuff. We mentioned lore. We've mentioned so many things that an hour-long podcast, 2 hour long. They're just not long enough sometimes.
I was going to say, there was quite a lot of like implication lore-wise, like the fact that Harding can do magic, or the fact that everything that the Chantry believed is a complete lie. Like there was a lot of heavy implications going on.
Who would have thought that the elven god of lies would lie to us?
And that's what they actually made an interesting point about that. Yes, he's the god of lies because that's what he has been labeled, but he's actually not lying, because that would imply that he's not telling the truth. He's just not revealing everything, which is not the same thing.
I'm
god
very
of
much
misleading.
A lie by omission is still a lie.
Well, if you want to interpret it and he doesn't dissuade you, then that's
elven god of fake news.
Yeah, fake. There you go. There you go. Solus. Oh yeah, that should be our thumbnail. Just Solus there. Fake news. Question mark. Yeah. Anyway.
It's just Solus's head plastered on our shoulders, and it's just the different looks of like.
Yeah. Just an egg. Just an egg.
Yeah. It's an egg. Egg with ears.
Oh, Solus with hair. That threw me for a while. I was like, oh that is
weird,
wholesome. Yeah.
That was weird.
I was like, that's.
It was interesting. I think we talked about this like earlier with the design of his hair. I definitely feel like they wanted to be like taken to the fact that they were take into account the fact that they implemented hair physics, but also not cover Solus's face at all. So they gave him this really weird hairstyle that doesn't suit Solus at all, in my opinion. So they could keep his face clear, but also have him have hair.
He was the most eloquent in the trailer park.
Yeah. The elven god of mullets.
Yeah. Reverse mohawk. Do it like I will say that I've been asking for hair physics in a BioWare game for so long, and I think they pulled it off. That was great for me. I love seeing it.
There were definitely a few times where I ran around in circles just being an idiot because my hair was flopping around.
Anything with a cape? Anything with a cape, I'd sit there and run in a circle and just like, I'm gonna hit you with my cape.
I need a new PC. I want you to bring us to a satisfying climax.
Let's not call it concluding.
I'm gonna complete.
Yeah.
I'm gonna finish. Well, I appreciate everybody being here, like I said before. And if you guys have to make comments or likes or whatever, we appreciate all types of interaction on our channel. We're not against.
Go ahead and tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. Explain why Banana loves Andromeda so much. We would love to
explain what my position is to me, please.
Yeah. So, but yes, please. Engagement is something we definitely encourage, and we love having Sniffs here. And if you like seeing Sniffs and you want to see some more, let us know. If you want to see Legion less, definitely let us know. But I appreciate Banana and Com and Sniffs, and we will see you again. So hopefully soon. Dragon Age Veilguard is not an end topic for us. We cover things all over. So if something comes up, who knows, maybe a free DLC, we'll be there. But until then, bye-bye.